Chapter 1535. It was no wonder that Lin would be so dumbstruck. He didn't even know if he could defeat Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. However, his opponent had backed down and fled without even putting up a fight. That was way too absurd. The Celestial Larch, Black Spirit Snake, White Spirit Snake, and the others also caught up, and they all stopped with confusion on their faces upon seeing that even Lin was unable to catch up to her. Did Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu detect some sort of danger? Black Spirit Snake's brows furrowed. Isn't that obvious? He must have realized that he couldn't defeat Seniorin, so he ran away. White Spirit Snake grinned as she spoke. Her eyes shone brightly, and there was a mysterious sense of confidence in her eyes. And Lin turned to the two beautiful snake women, and his divine halo disappeared as he clasped his hands behind his back with a faint smile on his face. That is indeed the case. Black Spirit Snake rolled her eyes while White Spirit Snake wore a dainty smile. The celestial Thearcha's face convulsed, and he cleared his throat. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu must have fled for some unknown reason, or perhaps there is something that could threaten her life. In any case, this is a good thing for us. And Lin carefully examined himself. What was so bad *SS about him that he could strike such fear into Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's heart? That level of fear was something that could only be achieved with crushing power. He thought about it for a long time, and it seemed like only when he was on the brink of death would he be able to unleash a power that struck fear into Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's heart. But surely Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu wasn't that powerful? She could even see the system's hidden buff mystic technique? That was impossible. Even the heavenly gods didn't know about this, so how could a heavenly human tribe, heavenly god, know about it? And Lin was more and more perplexed the more he thought about it. Meanwhile, 5,000 kilometers away from the heavenly snake lightning lake, the ancient dragon empress heaved a forlorn sigh. We were too slow again. Raphaela's brows furrowed with an aggrieved expression. It's all my fault, that's enough. She's very sensitive, so we wouldn't be able to catch her even if we were nearby. Chen Chen still wore a nonchalant expression. On the contrary, having Lin and the others battle against divine heaven stage heavenly humans is beneficial to their growth, so it's not a bad idea. Raphael was slightly startled. Am I being comforted? She blinked her azure blue eyes and looked at the youth beside her. She suddenly felt that the youth was very considerate and gentle. Although his expression was a little indifferent, it made her feel even more. What do we do now? The ancient dragon empress asked. Keep hiding. Don't go too far this time, Chen Chen said. Thus, the three of them continued to stay close to the extermination team. As a hidden trump card, they were still very conscious. Even if this trump card was very likely to be discovered by the enemy, they still had to pretend that they didn't know. Heavenly Snake Lightning Lake Battlefield. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army experienced a journey from heaven to hell, then from hell to heaven, and then back to hell again. It was like riding a roller coaster. Just a minute ago, he had said that he would kill all the experts on the field within a minute. The next minute, he was out of sight. Was he a fake heavenly god? All of the heavenly human tribe powerful beings were struck by the urge to throw up blood. As for the blood tribe and void spirit tribe, they couldn't help but curse with grief and indignation. They had never seen such a shameless person before. The big shots came and went like the wind. How were they going to survive? The Phoenix was still maintaining the massive divine flame cage, which even returned to void stage mighty figures were unable to forcibly break through. Battle erupted once again. The scales of victory were undoubtedly tipping in the Spirit Lake Realm United Army's favor. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army had no choice but to fight to the death. Their most powerful beings were severely wounded, so they were basically at the mercy of the enemy. However, even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered, and casualties were unavoidable for the Spirit Lake Realm United Army. However, all of this was completely reversed after the return of Lin, Black Spirit Snake, White Spirit Snake, and the Celestial Larch. The Tao integration stage super mighty figures made all of the living beings on the ground experience what it meant to be able to move mountains and fill oceans. Each and every one of their attacks was like a doomsday disaster. Black Spirit Snake charged through the air with her divine sword in hand. Golden sword projections flashed through the air as if she were invincible. White Spirit Snake's body was graceful, and her yin and yang dual swords were like the sun and the moon. Each and every time she leaped through the air, her sword intent would expand to a radius of close to 10 kilometers, evading all of her allies with unerring accuracy before sealing all of her enemies in ice or incinerating them. The celestial Dharch walked through the battlefield, and all of the enemies he passed by would explode on the spot as they were unable to withstand his terrifying might. In contrast, the Spirit Lake Realm United Army felt as if they were bathing in a warm spring breeze. They felt like all of their injuries had healed significantly at the sight of the celestial Thearcha's warm smile, and their hearts were throbbing with excitement. Enlil found the heavenly human tribe general, who had exposed his identity to heavenly goddess Lin Yu and unleashed a heavenly ghost palm upon him. The heavenly ghost palm was a spell technique that he had attained stage 2 of a yin-type cultivation method after living a miserable life as a blade of grass in a strange space. It was imbued with extremely powerful yin-type power and was constructed from the resentment of billions of vengeful ghosts. When unleashed at full power, it could inflict excruciating agony upon one's opponent. As one's power grew, they could even unleash the power of extreme evil in the river of time to inflict extreme evil pain on their opponents. That soul-piercing stage general dared to expose Enlin's identity, so Enlil naturally had to show him the power of the heavenly ghost palm. Thus, the heavenly human tribe general's heart-wrenching wails erupted throughout heaven and earth. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that his bragging would be remembered by a mighty figure like Enlil, and that Enlil would come back after a fierce battle to unleash the most vicious spell technique on him. Was this king necessary? Where was his dignity and dignity? The heavenly human tribe general experienced what it truly meant to be a living hell. His blood-curdling wails and tragic appearance sent chills running down the spines of the surrounding heavenly human tribe united army. Even the Spirit Lake Realm United Army was given a fright, and all of them had a new impression of Enlil. This was a man who held grudges, so they definitely couldn't afford to mess with him. The battle was still ongoing, but there was no longer any doubt as to who would emerge victorious. Soon, the Heavenly Snake Lightning Lake battle concluded with the complete annihilation of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army. On the battlefield, the bodies of Heavenly Human Tribe, Void Spirit Tribe, and Blood Tribe cultivators littered the ground, creating rivers of blood. After slaying the final enemy, the Spirit Lake Realm United Army looked around at the empty battlefield with a dazed expression. Aside from the god-engulfing skeleton, all of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army had perished on the battlefield. This was the first time the Spirit Lake Realm United Army had achieved such a devastating victory in the past few decades. Chapter 1536. Millions of spirit beasts turned their eyes toward the white-robed man and the dozen or so other powerful beings who had descended from the sky. If it weren't for the fact that they had arrived at the most critical moment and turned the tables with absolute power, there was no way that they would have been able to secure such a complete victory. This was a pleasant surprise that they would never have dreamed of, and it was the most exciting ray of hope that they had ever seen in the past several decades of despair. Did you hear? Enlil said that their team is called the Extermination Team. Extermination Team? What a stingy name. Isn't it the Heaven Extermination Team? As long as we get it. This team is the epitome of victory. All of their members are so extraordinarily powerful. The 4-9 Immortal Sect really is the #1 sect in the Kingdom of the 9 States. Apparently, this team was formed to wipe out the entire Heavenly Human Tribe army on the southern front. Gasp. What a bad *SS mission. All of the spirit beasts turned to Enlil and the others with reverence in their eyes. And Lin's team was very powerful, to the extent that they had even managed to force one of the most powerful beings in the heavenly human tribe, heavenly goddess Linyu, into retreat. To describe it in the cultivation world, it would be described as terrifying, powerful, mysterious, and full of hope. These were the impressions that all of the spirit beasts had toward the extermination team. Enlin, Su Xiaolan, the Celestial Larch, the Phoenix, Tina, Bai Ling, Xianyuan Cheng, and the others had become the most dazzling stars in the eyes of the spirit beasts, and they were greeted or bowed to wherever they went. Enlin gathered all of the extermination team members together before swallowing immortal pills. This was a joyous occasion. After the battle, they had to recover from their injuries and recover their energy as quickly as possible. They were about to embark on an even more intense battle. The half-dead Golden Sun Snake Emperor had been handed over to Bai Ling. Black Spirit Snake and White Spirit Snake made their way to Enlin's side before appraising him with curiosity. Not only them, but even the Fist Sage and the other Return to Void stage mighty figures also made their way over to join in on the fun. Senior Enlin, I knew you weren't dead. White Spirit Snake ran over to Enlin with a vibrant smile on her face before giving him an elated hug. A fragrant scent wafted over, and a warm jade filled his chest. Enlin didn't expect that White Spirit Snake would still treat him warmly and respectfully even after so many years had passed. She was still the same as before. He did not dare to hug her greedily. He symbolically patted her slender waist and separated from her, just like an old friend who had not seen each other for a long time. Little Bai, the rate at which your cultivation base is rising is quite frightening, said Enlin with a smile. White Spirit Snake's eyes were clear and bright, and she replied in a nonchalant manner, It's all because of some opportunities. However, I'm a reincarnated being, so I still have my original Tao and observations, so I'm able to progress faster. Enlin's lips twitched involuntarily. When you say a little faster, are you referring to jumping from the Tao body stage to the Tao integration pinnacle stage in 100 years? Alright, let's not talk about cultivation for now. A huge golden sword suddenly appeared between Enlin and White Spirit Snake. The tall and slender Black Spirit Snake in a black dress interjected in a domineering manner. She turned to Enlin with a, "Don't seduce my little sister" expression. Why did you guys suddenly come here? What happened to the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army in the Kingdom of the Nine States? The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army of over 20 million has been completely wiped out aside from Emperor Yi Deng, Enlin replied in a cold voice. Black Spirit Snake and White Spirit Snake both drew sharp intakes of breath with astonishment etched on their faces. All of the other Return to Void stage mighty figures' mouths gaped open in shock. Completely wiped out? The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army that bypassed us to attack the Kingdom of the Nine States was also wiped out? Empress Helen, Emperor Bei Xing, and a large number of Heavenly Human Tribe great generals and generals were all wiped out? My God! All of the mighty figures present exclaimed in shock as they turned to Enlin and the others with incredulity in their eyes. The extermination team was even more terrifying than they had imagined. The drastic changes in the top-tier combat prowess of both sides had undoubtedly turned the entire situation around. The Fist Sage was already getting quite excited. So that means we've already wiped out the vast majority of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army on the southern front. This is an unprecedented victory. This is going to rock the entire continent. He could already imagine what kind of storm it would set off in the continent when the news of the battle spread. When that time came, the extermination team, no, the name of the 4-9 Immortal Sect, would be renowned across the entire continent. Now that the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army has been wiped out, what are you going to do next, Senior Enlin? Are you going to provide reinforcements on the other fronts? White Spirit Snake asked. Enlin shook his head. We still have enemies to take care of, right? I'm going to continue onward. Continue onward. White Spirit Snake couldn't help but let loose a cry of surprise as she clasped her hand over her mouth, as if a thought had occurred to her. "You're saying, you're going to fight your way to the southern heavenly gate?" Unlin chuckled. "Of course. My team is the extermination team, and we're not going to stop here. How can we turn back now?" All of the mighty figures were astonished again. So the extermination team wasn't satisfied after wiping out almost all of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army. They were going to attack the Heavenly Gate on the southern front. Countless Spirit Beast Tribe mighty figures turned to the extermination team with even more reverence in their eyes. Some of them even volunteered to join the extermination team. In reality, they had already been pummeled to the core. Even though they knew that Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu and a Heavenly God embodiment of the Heavenly Tao were there, they were still not scared. All of them knew that this was the only way to end this war. White Spirit Snake also volunteered with excitement. Black Spirit Snake hesitated momentarily before also asking if she could join the extermination team. And Lin was naturally not going to refuse the assistance of a Tao integration stage super mighty figure. As the team leader, he was very elated to accept the two beautiful snake women. He also reluctantly accepted the bald man's application. The Fist Sage had beaten him up in the past, so Enlin was going to give him a spot on the extermination team, no matter what. As for the severely wounded Golden Sun Snake Emperor and all of the other Spirit Beast Tribe mighty figures who wanted to join, Black Spirit Snake ordered them to stay at the Spirit Lake realm in case of any mishap. Enlin was already very happy and satisfied to be able to recruit two powerful snake maidens. He didn't dare to ask for anything more. As such, his extermination team had become more powerful, and they had become a lot more powerful. White Spirit Snake was still jabbering away beside him, asking Enlin about the past 100 years. Enlin had no choice but to provide a concise explanation. So on so. White Spirit Snake let loose a string of cries of surprise. Black Spirit Snake couldn't help but take a few extra glances at Enlin. The Spirit Beast Tribe and the human race were very friendly, and the relationship between Black Spirit Snake and Enlin had also eased significantly. Perhaps this was due to the fact that they shared a common enemy and had fought alongside one another. Thump thump thump, the sound of knocking suddenly erupted from the coffin behind Enlin. Chapter 1537. Enlin was given a fright upon hearing this, and he immediately recalled that Xiaolan was still in the coffin. Now that Xiaolan had knocked on the coffin door, he naturally understood what was going on and immediately opened the coffin door. Su Xiaolan opened her eyes and raised her arms in the air. Enlin understood what she meant, and he gently helped her up with a warm smile on his face. "You're awake, Xiaolan?" Su Xiaolan was still feeble, and she looked around at the battlefield with curiosity in her eyes. Is the battle already over?" Enlin nodded. "That's right. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army has already been defeated." Tina chimed in with excitement. "Even the Divine Heaven Stage Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was forced into retreat by us." Su Xiaolan stared at Enlin with astonishment on her face. "What did I miss?" Enlin hurriedly explained what had happened to the woman. He told her about how Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu had declared that she would be able to defeat them in a minute, as well as how Enlin had scared Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu away with a threatening aura. Su Xiaolan was quite astonished as she listened. She would automatically filter out Enlin's words, such as Enlin using his threatening aura to scare Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu away. Then, she would roughly reconstruct the battle that had taken place. It had to be said that Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu still gave her an unfathomable image. "Are we still going to continue?" Su Xiaolan asked. Enlin nodded with a firm expression. "Yes." He looked at Su Xiaolan's pale and feeble features. "I'll go with you," Su Xiaolan interjected. A warm smile appeared on Enlin's face. "Then you should focus on recovering first. The Blood Soul Jade Coffin, the recovery power of the Immortal Pill, and the astonishing recovery power of Su Xiaolan's vermilion bird bloodline combined to allow her to recover her strength very quickly. However, Unlin's brows were still furrowed slightly. He used his divine inspection technique to appraise Su Xiaolan's body, and he discovered that the after effects of using the buff spell technique had still surfaced. Her meridians had become extremely frail, and her consciousness was also quite feeble. Furthermore, both of these were recovering very slowly. After the meridians became brittle, any changes would affect the nerves of the entire body. Xiaolan must be in a lot of pain right now, but she's just not showing it. The simple repairs were over. Unlin put Su Xiaolan back into the coffin and carried it on his back. The celestial larch, black spirit snake, white spirit snake, the phoenix, Tina, Bai Ling, and the fist sage all stood up with battle intent burning in their eyes. All of the spirit beasts turned to look at the dozen or so beings flying toward the phoenix's back with scorching reverence and yearning in their eyes. They knew that this legendary team was going to stir up some trouble again. Extermination team, onward! Unlin pointed toward the south as he spoke in a heroic voice. Chirp! The phoenix also let loose a heroic cry. It spread open its wings, upon which its fiery wings glowed with dazzling light, and it rose into the air before flying toward the south like a flaming streak of light. All of the spirit beasts could see a crimson streak of light flashing through the sky, as if it were the light of hope that extended all the way to the end of the heavens. The heavenly human tribe on the southern front had appeared from the border of the southern heavenly wing nation in the southernmost part of the Tai Chu continent. Apparently, there was a gargantuan heavenly gate there, which was eternal and impenetrable to Tao integration stage powers. The gate connected the two worlds, and the heavenly human tribe was most likely situated within it. Not only was the objective of Unlin's extermination team to destroy the enemy forces, but they also had to find a way to destroy their crystal. In other words, they had to destroy the enemy's heavenly gate. Only by doing that could they live up to their title as the extermination team. Oh, there's a heavenly human tribe base here. Unlin looked down to discover a grand fortress, within which there were many heavenly human tribe powerful beings walking about. The phoenix let loose a chirp before opening its mouth to blast forth a massive fireball. The massive fireball fell from the sky like a meteorite. Some of the heavenly human tribe living beings within the heavenly human tribe base immediately sounded the alarm upon seeing this. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Over 10,000 heavenly human tribe powerful beings hurriedly injected their power into the defensive spell formation. The spell formation enshrouded an area of close to 10 kilometers in radius, protecting the entire base. However, when they raised their heads and saw the huge fireball that was large enough to cover the sky falling like a falling sun, despair appeared on their faces. Is this a joke? Which Tao integration stage super mighty figure came all the way here to mess with us? Some of the heavenly human tribe powerful beings were on the verge of tears. An attack from a Tao integration stage mythological beast was extremely terrifying. The massive fireball crashed through the heavenly human tribe base's spell formation in an extremely violent manner, upon which destructive power erupted forth, incinerating all things between heaven and earth as a spectacular mushroom cloud erupted from the ground. The divine flame explosion instantly engulfed the heavenly human tribe base, incinerating over 10,000 heavenly human tribe powerful beings into ashes. Awesome! Xianyuan Cheng's eyes glowed with excitement. Unlin shot a glance at Big Brother Cheng and repressed his urge to grumble. The phoenix let out a cry, but it didn't stop flapping its wings as it continued to fly south. The heavenly human tribe powerful beings didn't even have the right to make the phoenix pause for a moment. It was as if it had merely spat on the ground, and the heavenly human tribe base had been destroyed 1 hour later. A vast expanse of lush green land appeared before their eyes. Towering trees grew on the ground, as if they were taller than anyone else. Each tree was taller than the last, growing with all their might. Trees over 100 meters tall could be seen everywhere, and there were many sky trees over 1,000 meters tall as well. There were even super sky trees over 1,000 meters tall, as well as divine trees over 10,000 meters tall. All of them competed with one another in this vast expanse of lush greenery. As for the saying that the tallest tree in the forest would attract the most wind, that didn't apply at all here. The taller the tree, the safer it would be. Powerful birds all liked to perch on tall trees as this represented their status, and at the same time, they protected the tree. As for the sun tree, there were 3 Tao integration stage mythological beasts stationed there, which represented their supreme status. If anyone tried to destroy the sun tree, they would most likely be executed several dozen times over. This is the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation. A reminiscent expression appeared on Lin's face. Thinking back, he had traveled around the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation with Shuizhantian, and he had encountered the adorable vermilion bird princess, the guardian of the sun tree, Ili, and he had also obtained the core inheritances of the eternal sun god, the Kuan Pung, and the vermilion bird princess. When the heavenly human tribe descended upon this world with the will of the heavens, the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation, which was closest to the Southern Heavenly Gate, chose not to side with the heavenly human tribe. Instead, they chose to remain neutral. This was good news for Lin. At the very least, he didn't have to face his old friends. At this moment, in the central region of the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation, a gargantuan divine tree that extended into the clouds with no end in sight stood on the ground. On the 8th level of the sun tree, which was enshrouded in white mist. This place was deathly silent, and there were stars twinkling within the darkness. Black leaves rustled in the wind. A young woman in a colorful dress was meditating when she suddenly opened her bright eyes. There are Tao integration stage super mighty figures in the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation. Holy F***CK. So many? The young woman in a colorful dress abruptly stood up with astonishment etched on her face. Are they here to destroy our home? Chapter 1538. This beautiful woman in a colorful dress was one of the 3 Tao integration stage mighty figures of the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation's sun tree, the 9-colored divine vermilion bird. Xiao Ke, don't panic. At this moment, a gentle voice suddenly sounded. In front of the multicolor-clothed girl was a giant divine bird. It looked like an eagle. Its feathers were white and flawless, and its eyes were golden. There were 2 pairs of wings on its back, and 4 slender legs grew from its abdomen. From afar, it looked like a ferocious beast running on the ground, but it was actually a bird, and it was the most powerful being in the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation, the mythological beast, the eternal sun god. Why aren't you panicking? There are 5 Tao integration stage puppets. The vermilion bird princess spread open her palm and extended her 5 slender fingers in an exaggerated manner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 We're going up the mountain to hunt the tiger. Anyone who saw 5 Tao integration stage super mighty figures trespassing on the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation's territory without warning would be panicked and uneasy. After all, no top-tier power on the Taichu continent would dare to disregard 5 Tao integration stage super mighty figures. The eternal sun god, on the other hand, looked toward the north with a leisurely smile. We're not their target. Not us? The vermilion bird princess faltered momentarily before her mouth gaped open in astonishment. Could it be that their target is the gate in the south? The eternal sun god smiled noncommittally. Where did all these Tao integration stage super mighty figures come from? Where did he get the guts to do that? The vermilion bird princess was still in disbelief. Perhaps this is the backup plan of a god of creation, or perhaps the kingdom of the 9 states, or even the heaven-crushing forces are going all out. Who knows? The eternal sun god's eyes lit up. All I know is that we're in for a good show. 5 Tao integration stage super mighty figures were more than enough to dominate an entire realm. However, the heavenly human tribe was no pushover. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was a divine heaven stage heavenly goddess, and an unknown heavenly God. No living being had ever approached the southern heavenly gate, so no one knew what lay beyond the southern heavenly gate. It was conceivable that this would be an earth-shattering duel. The vermilion bird princess had clearly thought of this as well, and she hummed a little tune as she flew through the air. "Little sparrow, what are you trying to do?" The eternal sun god's expression changed. "Of course I have to spectate such a thrilling battle." The vermilion bird princess giggled before disappearing as a streak of 9-colored light. The eternal sun god opened its mouth to try and dissuade the 9-colored divine vermilion bird, but it decided against it in the end when it thought about the 9-colored divine vermilion bird's personality. At the top of the sun tree, a regal and gorgeous divine bird flew through the air toward the south. Countless birds lowered their proud heads at the sight of that gorgeous, slender, and graceful figure, as if they were bowing to her. The 9-colored divine vermilion bird was the most beautiful bird in the world. Any proud bird that saw her would be struck by a sense of inferiority, and they would willingly lower their heads to her. This was very rare in such a proud race. All of the birds sent off the 9-colored divine vermilion bird in a respectful manner. "Phew! The 9-colored divine vermilion bird has left. What a beautiful back that I yearn for. I can't get enough of it no matter how many times I look at it. I wonder where Master Divine Vermilion Bird is going. The south is an ominous place. Will it be dangerous for her to go there? She's a mythological beast. It's none of your business whether she's going to be in danger or not." All of the birds discussed spiritedly among themselves. They lived in the mountains and forests, and even though an unprecedented war had erupted across the Taichu continent, they were still able to stay out of it and enjoy themselves. However, all of the birds didn't even get a chance to heave a sigh of relief. All of a sudden, an extremely terrifying aura swept toward them from afar. The temperature of heaven and earth inexplicably rose by quite a bit. Flames spread through the sky like a red carpet, and a figure that was the envy of all the birds appeared. Divine flames flashed through the air, and a phoenix appeared. Its indescribable grandeur and beauty had all of the birds entranced. "A phoenix? It's a purebred phoenix. My God, that's a real phoenix mythological beast!" Countless birds yelled with scorching excitement in their eyes. In contrast to the admiration and yearning they felt toward the 9-colored divine vermilion bird, the phoenix was able to evoke the hidden excitement in their bloodlines, and some of the birds even wanted to follow behind the phoenix. However, in just a few seconds, he was completely out of sight. What does the phoenix's reappearance signify? It feels a little like the phoenix of the 4-9 Immortal sect. Don't be stupid. The phoenix of the 4-9 Immortal sect is currently fighting the heavenly human tribe in the Kingdom of the 9 States, so how could it come here? All of a sudden, their voices faltered. A peculiar silence ensued. "No way, it's possible. So the phoenix's target is the southern heavenly gate?" Some of the birds had already dropped the fruits in their mouth. "Holy F***CK. Bad *SS. This is going to be exciting." All of the birds were extremely excited. At this moment, the phoenix had already arrived at the southern tip of the southern heavenly wing nation. It seemed to be very fond of this place, and it began to let loose melodic cries, as if it were singing. For example, this chirp chirp, chirp chirp chirp, and this chirp chirp, chirp, chirp chirp chirp, were all extremely moving and pleasant to the ears. This was the first time Lin had heard a phoenix sing, and he closed his eyes and listened with elation. Tina also hummed softly, as if she was also entranced by the beautiful melody. Su Xiaolan lay in her coffin, and she was feeling a little drowsy as she listened to this music. The phoenix hummed a melody before suddenly turning its head and spitting out a burst of scorching divine flames 150 kilometers away. The divine flames fell from the heavens like a crimson bolt of lightning, instantly incinerating a radius of over 50 kilometers into the ground, incinerating everything on the ground. Over 20,000 heavenly human tribe powerful beings had been annihilated. Perhaps they hadn't even seen the phoenix's true body before they were incinerated to death. There was no reason for this, as the disparity in power between the two sides was like an insurmountable chasm. The phoenix had already destroyed a dozen or so heavenly human tribe powerful beings. Due to the fact that they were missing some of their most powerful beings, all of them were annihilated like cannon fodder. Thus, the extermination team continued onward with unstoppable force. All of the birds looked up at the phoenix flying through the sky with curiosity or excitement. As they continued onward, Unlin and the others slowly approached the southernmost part of the southern heavenly wing nation. The earth below them was a vast expanse of yellow and gray. Many of the lush trees had turned yellow or dark gray, as if they were suffering from malnutrition. However, strangely enough, these malnourished trees were filled with a different type of vitality. Their branches and leaves were flourishing, and they were growing taller and taller. The air temperature gradually rose. The setting sun dyed the entire sky red, and the red hue of the earth blended together with the gray hue of the earth, creating a peculiar and austere atmosphere. As far as the eye could see, there was a line between the crimson sky and the dark gray horizon. There was a speck of white light that shone like a star. Chapter 1539. Unlin immediately guessed what the speck of white light was upon seeing it. The celestial court had a southern heavenly gate, which was the gate that connected the mortal world to the celestial court. The heavenly human tribe also had a southern heavenly gate, which was the gate that connected the heavenly human tribe territory to the Tai Chu continent. Thinking about it that way, the two southern heavenly gates seemed to have something in common. Unlin suddenly thought back to Monkey Sun, who had once fought his way to the southern heavenly gate. The extermination team was now like Monkey Sun, who had wreaked havoc in the heavenly palace. They were determined to turn the south heaven gate upside down and kill all the celestial beings. This was an extremely proud and domineering spirit. In just a single day, they fought from the kingdom of the 9 states to the Spirit Lake realm, then from the Spirit Lake realm to the southern heavenly wing nation. Over 30 million heavenly human tribe united army had perished, including hundreds of return-to-void stage soul-piercing stage mighty figures, a dozen or so heaven pioneer stage great generals, and even 3 Tao integration stage mighty figures had fallen. Wherever the extermination team passed, blood flowed like rivers. They killed gods and Buddhas that stood in their way. They were so sharp that no one could stop them. Gradually, everyone's disposition began to change. After 2 victories, not only were they full of confidence, but even their Tao hearts had become a lot more stable. Battle was the best way to cultivate, and it was also the best way to verify one's own Tao. After 2 extremely high-level and satisfying battles, as well as 3 deaths at the hands of Tao integration stage mighty figures, many of them were beginning to feel their cultivation bases waver a little. Unlin took a deep breath as he looked at the approaching spot of white light. Everyone, get ready for battle. Everyone drew their weapons at the sight of the spot of white light in the distance. Bai Ling even pulled out a pair of binoculars to look in the direction of the spot of white light. It's just a vast expanse of white. Looks like it's being shielded by some kind of energy. A smile appeared on her face. She was not surprised to hear this, and she silently pulled out a massive cannon from her storage ring before turning to Unlin. Should we fire a cannon at them first? Xianyuan Cheng's eyes lit up with excitement. Let's use cannons to clear a path for the extermination team? That's a good idea. Unlin also found it interesting and nodded lightly. A faint smile appeared on Bai Ling's face as she patted the cannon turret, upon which a complicated white spell formation appeared to activate the cannon. At the same time, the energy within the cannon turret was activated, and the cannon fire became even more fearsome. Everyone could feel the terrifying energy contained within the cannon, and they silently retreated further away. Even though they knew that Bai Ling's control was extremely precise, they still chose to silently back away. This was an instinctive reaction, and it wasn't because they didn't trust Bai Ling. The phoenix let out 2 chirps, appearing somewhat uneasy. Anyone who had a cannon constantly charging up power on their head would feel somewhat apprehensive and afraid. By Ling's cold, mechanical voice sounded. Energy charge complete. Missile camouflage system activated. Trajectory corrected. Target locked on. Error of 1 in 100 million. Prepare to fire. She stretched out her fair and slender palm and gently patted Big Pow's butt. But, boom! An earth-shattering roar echoed throughout the heavens and earth. The cannon fire roared like the most ferocious prehistoric beasts, spewing out energy like the sun. Because of the terrifying recoil, the phoenix's body leaned forward and almost flipped over. The cannon fire was extremely concentrated, and it was imbued with a power that even the celestial Thearcha's heart palpitated with fear as it hurtled through the heavens toward the star-like speck of light on the horizon. The light from the cannon lit up the entire heavenly realm. The celestial Tharch was astonished. The southern heavenly gate was at least tens of thousands of kilometers away, which was far beyond the attack range of a Tao integration stage super mighty figure. However, Bai Ling's cannon fire was able to strike with extreme accuracy, which was quite astonishing. Furthermore, the cannon fire was also extremely terrifying. At the very least, from the perspective of the most powerful being in the Kingdom of the Nine States, the celestial Tharch most likely wouldn't be able to survive this cannon fire. Meanwhile, at the southern heavenly gate, a majestic gate exuding an ancient and primordial aura stood between heaven and earth. It was constructed from two colorful energy pillars over 1,000,000 feet tall. Outside the pillars were a pair of gargantuan bronze gates, and within the pillars was a boundless white light that was impossible to see through, but it was also extremely alluring, as if it led to another world. The vastly renowned southern heavenly gate of the heavenly human tribe was actually quite simple, but not a single human had dared to set foot on this holy land in the past few decades. Outside the gate was a vast expanse of lush green grass with countless beautiful flowers that were around half the height of a grown man. They swayed gracefully in the night breeze, exuding a silent sense of allure. There were a few pure white houses on the grassland. They were all intricate, simple, and very ordinary, but they were exuding extremely terrifying energy fluctuations. There was a series of heavenly human tribe powerful beings with extraordinary dispositions moving about within the houses, all of which possessed Heaven Pioneer stage power. In other words, all of the heavenly human tribe powerful beings here had the power to command the heavenly human tribe united army. The setting sun dyed the entire sky a crimson color. A crimson moon appeared in the sky, complementing the color of the sky. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was sitting on a lounge chair with a graceful expression. Her golden eyes reflected the light of the setting sun, and she held a lotus-shaped cup in her hand as she sipped on some immortal flower juice. Her pristine features were filled with sorrow. Sigh. She heaved a gentle sigh. It was quite clear that she had a lot on her mind and was feeling a little resentful. Don't think too much. If you have no desires, you will have no worries. A voice that was as warm as smoke sounded. Not far to the left of Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu, there was a man who was also dressed in a cloud and mist robe meditating. The man's eyes were tightly shut, and he made a strange hand seal with his hands. Power was constantly being injected into his body from the heavens above. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's distressed expression did not abate in the slightest upon hearing this. Instead, she was even more depressed. How can I have no desires? I was so humiliated just then. Didn't you see the smug expression on Lin's face when he chased after me? That was the most humiliating thing I've ever done in my life. She was not distressed by the fact that the entire heavenly human tribe united army had been wiped out. Instead, she was feeling extremely humiliated by the situation she had been in. The man shot a glance at Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. Instead of worrying about that, you should focus on recovering from the backlash you received from the Heavenly Tao. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu raised her left arm upon hearing this. There was a black patch on her wrist that appeared to be rotting, and it was even showing signs of expanding outward. Lin Yu was a perfectionist, but her brows furrowed slightly at the sight of her own inky black wrist. Such a glaring flaw had appeared on a flawless body. It was as if she had OCD. Sigh. What can I do? I can only let time erase all of this. The next time we meet, I'll definitely exact my revenge. A cold light flashed through heavenly goddess Lin Yu's eyes. Perhaps that day won't be too far away, the man said. Heavenly goddess Lin Yu cocked her head to the side, and her mouth gaped open slightly as she looked up at the sky in the distance with a hint of surprise on her face. There was a burst of terrifying energy hurtling toward them like a meteorite. Chapter 1540. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu didn't think that there would be enemies attacking the southern heavenly gate. It had always been the heavenly human tribe attacking others. Since when did it become someone else's turn to attack the heavenly human tribe? She knew who had done this almost instantly. Aside from those few fearless figures, no one would dare to do something like this. Lin Yu burst into laughter. Do you really think you can do whatever you want at the southern heavenly gate just because you destroyed the heavenly human tribe united army? If you want to die, then don't blame me. At this moment, 9 pillars of white light had already risen into the sky, forming an extremely massive barrier that enshrouded everything within the southern heavenly gate. Cannon blasts crashed into the barrier, immediately following which an earth-shattering explosion erupted. The energy that could destroy heaven and earth was completely released at this moment, annihilating everything it came into contact with. Lightning, flames, molecular destruction, quantum destruction. Outside the southern heavenly gate, the light from the explosion lit up for thousands of kilometers. The Earth within a radius of over 1,000 kilometers was instantly engulfed by terrifying energy. And Lin could see the ball of destructive light that was as dazzling as a massive fireball even from tens of thousands of kilometers away. It was as if a new sun had suddenly risen up after the sun had set, diluting the crimson hue in the sky significantly. TSK, what a spectacular welcome gift. And Lin wore a wide smile on his face. He's very sincere. Xianyuan Cheng was also very excited. Forcibly planting a little sun like this is all heresy, Xiao Hong said in her sweet voice. I wonder if they're still alive. It would be great if the southern heavenly gate was destroyed as well, woof. Dabai stuck out his tongue with anticipation on his face. The extermination team admired the exploding sun in the sky as they grumbled. However, a disappointed expression suddenly appeared on Bai Ling's face. It's been blocked. They have an extremely powerful spell formation that completely blocked our attack. Everyone's expression shifted upon hearing this. Bai Ling's cannon had already exceeded the Dao integration stage in terms of power, but it had still been blocked. Just how powerful was their enemy's spell formation? Even though they were a little nervous, they weren't all that surprised. If the final boss couldn't even take a single cannon blast from Bai Ling, then it wouldn't have been able to destroy the heavenly human tribe after fighting for several decades. The phoenix continued to fly in the direction of the southern heavenly gate. It glanced fearfully at the tall and beautiful woman in white on its back. If the woman's cannon had accidentally hit it, would it have died? When it thought of this, it couldn't help but shiver. Woo woo woo, how terrifying! The flying speed of the phoenix was very fast. Soon, they were less than 10,000 li away from the South Heaven Gate. The energy of the explosion had dissipated. The white formation spanned hundreds of miles. At this moment there were some cracks, but it had not been destroyed. Outside the array, an incomparably huge crater appeared on the ground. Whether it was flowers, trees, birds, beasts, insects, fish, or the earth, everything was completely blasted into nothingness. It was an extremely shocking sight. And Lin finally saw the magnificent bronze gate. It was very, very big, so big that it seemed unreal. The rainbow-colored energy pillars were 1,000,000 zhang tall, supporting 2 doors that looked like small continents. The inside of the doors was a vast expanse of white, giving off a very pure and holy feeling. It was as if what he was searching for lay on the other side of the door, a path to happiness. I really want to go in and have a look. This was a thought that suddenly appeared in Lin's mind. It came without any warning, but it was extremely realistic. Outside the southern heavenly gate, Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu heaved a faint sigh at the sight of the group of people on the phoenix. A wry smile appeared on her face. It really is them. Isn't this a good opportunity for you to exact your revenge? The man chuckled. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu looked at the black, rotten area on her wrist, and she pouted with a pitiable expression. Jordan, how about you do it? I don't want to become ugly again. Heavenly God Jordan burst into laughter. I can't take on them on my own. If you and I attack at the same time, won't we be able to minimize the backlash from the heavenly Tao? Lin Yu thought about it for a moment before reluctantly accepting this suggestion. She admitted that she had underestimated Lin and the others. That was her problem. However, now that the two divine heaven stage cultivators of the southern heavenly gate had joined the fray, there was no chance for them to survive. How about we invite Metal? There's no need. We can't trouble him with something like this. Heavenly God Jordan immediately rejected Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's suggestion before leading the way. All great generals, heed my command. Annihilate all invaders. The heavenly god roared. The 9 heaven pioneers stage great generals roared in unison, and extremely terrifying auras erupted from their bodies as they followed Jordan toward the front of the battlefield. Lin Yu was a little resigned as she followed behind Jordan, preparing to face Lin and the others head-on. Atop the phoenix, Dabai drew a sharp intake of breath as he looked up ahead with astonishment. This is different from what I imagined. There are very few of them, but all of them are powerful beings who can take on an army of over 1 million on their own. Yi Ling was also a little concerned. 9 new Tao integration stage heavenly humans and 2 divine heaven stage heavenly humans with God of creation stage power. The fist sage's lips twitched. He was starting to wonder why he had tried so hard to join the extermination team in the first place. Oh, that's right. He had thought that there would be a bunch of cannon fodder for him to hammer, and he would be able to witness an epic battle as he pummeled the cannon fodder. However, reality was cruel. After arriving here, he tragically discovered that he couldn't even hammer a single one of them. Thankfully, the heavenly human tribe is restricted to varying degrees by the heavenly Tao. Otherwise, we really would have no choice but to turn tail and run. Black Spirit Snake licked her lips as she drew her massive sword, and the battle intent in her eyes surged. Lin caught sight of Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu in the distance, who was looking at him with an indescribable smile on her face. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu had noticed Lin's gaze, and she extended her inky black wrist before making a knife hand gesture toward his neck. Was she really that childish? Lin couldn't help but grumble in his heart. He put on a disdainful expression, but he had to admit that he was a little panicked, because he felt that he was being watched. The man beside Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was also a divine heaven stage cultivator. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was the only heavenly god known to the outside world, most likely because she would occasionally go out to scare people. However, who would have thought that there would be another heavenly god at the southern heavenly gate? This was a gate guarded by 2 heavenly gods. Lin was astonished, but he could accept this. The southern heavenly gate was like a tiger's den, and he was already prepared for an enemy that was more powerful than he had imagined. As for how he was going to deal with this, he only had one word to say: fight. Chapter 1541. Tao Heavenly Spell Technique, Heavenly Spear. The 9 heaven pioneers stage great generals were bathed in the light descending from the heavens as they made hand seals to materialize a spear that exuded extremely powerful energy fluctuations before them. The spears were pure white and imbued with the purest sharpness, as well as the will of the heavens that could destroy all things. The will of the heavens was similar to the absolute power of the heavenly gods, and the dazzling might of the heavens was on full display as soon as the 9 spears appeared. If a living being with a lower cultivation base were to be pointed at by the spears, they would have a hole punctured through their body before the spears even had a chance to fly. Now, all of the spears were aimed at the phoenix in the sky. The spears of heaven left a series of white trajectories in their wake as they pierced through space toward the phoenix at an extremely terrifying speed. It was also at this moment that they were struck by the powerful will of the heavens that wanted to kill them. The phoenix let loose a sharp cry as it spread open its wings, upon which a thick suit of armor appeared around its body. The spears of heaven crashed into the thick suit of armor, upon which an extremely sharp screeching sound erupted. The Tao integration stage armor materialized from divine flames began to slowly crumble. The 3 heavenly human tribe great generals combined their powers to battle a veteran Tao integration stage super mighty figure. Now that the 9 heavenly human tribe great generals were attacking at the same time, they were naturally quite powerful. However, it was also at this moment that the power of the celestial Dharch, black spirit snake, white spirit snake, and Enlil converged upon the phoenix's armor at the same time to pulverize the 9 spears of heaven. This won't pose any threat to those Tao integration stage super mighty figures, as most of them are super mighty figures at the Tao integration pinnacle stage, Heavenly God Jordan said in an indifferent voice. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu nodded slightly as her golden eyes reflected the rapidly approaching man. Enlil, you be *starred. I've decided to kill all of you in 59 seconds. She had shortened the 1-minute time limit by an entire second, as if she was trying to wash away the humiliation she had suffered. Enlil was astonished, and so were all of his companions. There was no one else in the world who could say such harsh words by name. This kind of treatment, this kind of standard, this kind of treatment. Big brotherin, you've been targeted, woof. Dabai drew a sharp intake of breath. He chased Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu for over 5,000 kilometers. Bai Ling couldn't help but chuckle. Let's decide who will be fighting as soon as possible, the celestial Dharch suggested. And Lin felt like crying. Do I have a choice? If he chose to fight the male heavenly god, Lin Yu would most likely attack him from behind. The phoenix cried out, indicating that it would fight alongside Enlil. A smile appeared on the celestial Thearcha's face. Black spirit snake, white spirit snake, and I will take on the male heavenly god. Enlil's expression darkened upon hearing this. The 3 of you are at the Tao integration pinnacle stage fighting a heavenly god, while I, a return to void stage cultivator, and a crying monster are fighting another heavenly god? What kind of arrangement was this? Was the celestial Dharch serious? Unexpectedly, the celestial Dharch said in a very serious manner, Others may not know your strength, but do you think I don't? Setting aside other Tao integration stage mighty figures, you're definitely a professional when it comes to dealing with heavenly human tribe mighty figures and heavenly gods. I'm also trying to maximize my resources in order to achieve victory. Enlil's mouth twitched involuntarily. The celestial Dharch really thought highly of him, however. In this arrangement, there was indeed a higher chance of success for both sides. The phoenix flew onward, and at this moment, all of the Heaven Pioneer stage heavenly human tribe mighty figures had already formed up into a unique formation. Enlil was quite concerned upon seeing this. The combination attack of the 3 great generals was far too powerful, and it was comparable to that of a veteran Tao integration stage mighty figure. No one else would be able to handle it. Bai Ling seemed to have guessed what Enlil was thinking, and she took the initiative to speak. I have an essence formation jammer that can disrupt the enemy's formation as well as their combination spell formations. However, it expends too much energy and can only last for 5 minutes. We must defeat all of the Heaven Pioneer stage great generals within 5 minutes. Enlil heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this. Xiao Hong and Tina's battle intent soared even higher. 5 minutes was enough for them to do a lot of things. Look out! The celestial Dharch suddenly yelled. Heavenly Sword. Countless inky black symbols formed a barrier that instantly enshrouded the phoenix. It was also at this moment that heavenly god Jordan's figure appeared before the phoenix. The golden divine halo on his right hand rotated at high speed, and his fist came crashing down with earth-shattering might. Bam! Shockwaves surged for over 100 kilometers. The heavenly sword caved in that instant. Disperse! Unlin yelled. Their enemies weren't going to give them any time to communicate. Dabai, Xiaohong, Merlin, Cassidy, Xianyuan Qing, Su Qianyun, Yi Ling, Tina, Sun Yulua, Yao Mingxi, Bai Ling, and the Fist Sage all dispersed at the same time. The heavenly human tribe great generals had already received orders to hunt down the return to void stage mighty figures. As for the Dao integration stage super mighty figures, they were naturally left to the heavenly god stage mighty figures. Only then would there be no doubt as to who would emerge victorious. These are just a bunch of ants. We should be able to finish them off faster than the heavenly god. A great general chuckled coldly as he chased after a dog. Kill them as quickly as possible, then help the heavenly gods. Another great general wore an expressionless expression as he looked at the mighty figures before him as if he were looking at a bunch of dead people. The 9 heavenly human tribe great generals split up into groups of 3 and chased down the scattered return to void stage mighty figures. If it weren't for the sake of safety, they wouldn't even bother using their combination spell formation. It was also at this moment that Bai Ling suddenly tossed a mechanical ball into the air. The mechanical ball suddenly expanded into a flat surface, immediately following which invisible radiation enshrouded an area with a radius of over 1,500 kilometers. Almost all of the heavenly human tribe mighty figures' auras were thrown into disarray at this moment, and the combination spell formation formed by the heavenly human tribe great generals suddenly lost connection. The heavenly human tribe great generals were dumbstruck. This was the first time they had encountered a combination spell formation that had suddenly lost connection. Even the divine heaven stage Lin Yu and Jordan's expressions shifted slightly. "Let's go." Bai Ling's clear voice sounded. Tina, Xianyuan Qing, and the others suddenly turned around and pounced toward the heavenly human tribe great generals. One spell technique after another engulfed the heavenly human tribe mighty figures. Black Spirit Snake and White Spirit Snake charged toward heavenly god Jordan with divine swords in their hand. Unlin stood atop his phoenix and pounced toward heavenly goddess Linyu. His divine flames blazed through the air as a black light erupted from his evil-slaying sword. Perfect timing. I'm going to show you the price you have to pay for chasing me for over 5,000 kilometers. Heavenly goddess Linyu chuckled coldly as a golden divine halo appeared around her wrist, and her aura soared explosively as she charged toward the man riding the phoenix at an even faster speed. The setting sun dyed the clouds red, and the crimson hue in the sky became even more pronounced. The blood moon became even more sinister as it eclipsed the radiance of the moon. The most intense battle in the history of the heavenly human tribe had finally erupted at this moment. Chapter 1542. Power of Metal. Royal Divine Monarch. A fair fist crashed into the inky black divine sword. Terrifying energy instantly shattered the space within a radius of 5 kilometers. After releasing her golden divine halo, heavenly goddess Lin Yu's power had increased explosively, and just a single punch was powerful enough to kill a Dao integration stage super mighty figure. However, Unlin's evil-slaying sword was imbued with the unique power of laws, and it was able to inflict a gash on heavenly goddess Lin Yu's fist. Unlin was blasted flying, and he felt as if all of the bones in his body had been shattered. Even his evil-slaying sword almost flew out of his hand. One had to realize that he was currently in his triple buff state, which was more than enough to pummel a normal Dao integration stage super mighty figure. However, he was still unable to withstand heavenly goddess Lin Yu's attack. Lin Yu also stumbled back a few steps and looked at the gash on her fist with a surprised expression. Your weapon is a little strange. I'm going to steal it for research. F***ck off. And Lin didn't even get a chance to attack before the evil-slaying sword sprang into action of its own accord. An inky black sword projection that threatened to engulf heaven and earth hurtled toward heavenly goddess Lin Yu. A white divine halo suddenly appeared on Lin Yu's left wrist, and her aura soared explosively again. Whoosh! Her body disappeared on the spot. Wow, a sword spirit with a temper. I like it. A seductive chuckle sounded from the sky. And Lin raised his head to discover that Lin Yu had already appeared above his head. There was a blue divine halo revolving around her waist, and there were two purple divine halos exuding a seductive light on her ankles in a pair of gorgeous white crystal shoes. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu had already activated her 5 divine halos. She looked down at Lin with a slight smile on her face. Behind her was a boundless crimson sky, and her eyes were a cold golden color. The purple divine light beneath her feet had already spread for over 50 kilometers. Purple gravitational stomp. Bam! And Lin could sense a boundless gravitational force crushing down upon him with unstoppable force. This was an indescribable power that affected every single part of his body. His bones, flesh, and blood all felt an indescribable sense of pressure. Without hesitation, Lin unleashed his evading turtle technique. Boom! The ground suddenly caved in like a ball of cotton being hammered flat. Lin's body landed heavily on the ground. His turtle shell cracked and shattered like glass. The divine flames of the phoenix had already engulfed heaven and earth as they swept toward heavenly goddess Lin Yu. Heavenly goddess Lin Yu was still smiling, and the divine halo around her waist began to glow. An absolute shield imbued with the will of the heavens materialized to keep the phoenix's divine flame attack at bay. Now, she did not have the leisure to deal with Phoenix. The most urgent matter at hand was to kill Lin. Howl in agony and anguish. It would be perfect if you shed a few tears. Heavenly goddess Lin Yu laughed heartily. She really enjoyed this moment, but she didn't hold back in the slightest. She stomped down with all her might, and boundless gravitational force pressed down relentlessly upon the ground. At this moment, Heavenly God Jordan also activated one divine halo after another, just like Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. The golden divine ring represented power, the white divine ring represented speed, and the blue divine ring represented defense. He had already awakened his third divine ring. The celestial Dharch, black spirit snake, and white spirit snake were all unleashing their full power to battle the heavenly gods to a standstill. The power unleashed by 3 mighty figures at the Tao integration pinnacle stage was not something that a normal cultivator could imagine. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they could crush the entire sky. Even the proud Heaven Pioneer stage great generals silently flew away to a place over 500 kilometers away in case they were killed by the shockwaves of the battle. Heavenly God Jordan remained calm and collected in the face of the attacks from the 3 super mighty figures. There was not a single hint of panic on his face, and he didn't even display any signs of attacking. However, the more he did so, the more uneasy the celestial Dharch and the others became. They were like powerful beings who were constantly fighting 3 or 4 at a time. They didn't display any signs of attacking, but they were also extremely calm and collected, as if they had a trump card in their hands, and they were just waiting to unleash it upon their enemies. On another battlefield, the intense battle had already painted the entire sky into a rainbow of colors. If it weren't for the fact that they had cultivated the heaven-crushing techniques, even 5 Return to Void stage mighty figures combined would be unable to oppose a Heaven Pioneer stage great general. But now, 3 Return to Void stage mighty figures were able to keep a Heaven Pioneer stage great general at bay. This was a result of their teamwork, as well as their understanding of the true intent of the heaven-crushing technique. Great General Ling Ming, who was wearing a golden robe with divine symbols, let loose an almighty roar as he sliced Cassidy in half from the waist with his holy light sword, upon which an extremely sharp sword intent swept forth for tens of thousands of meters. For my lord! Cassidy's upper body didn't stop attacking, and it slashed its crimson immortal sword toward Great General Ling Ming, slicing off a chunk of his arm. I die with no regrets. Merlin charged toward Great General Ling Ming with black-veined patterns all over his body, and a sinister ghostly aura emanated from his body as his power of the divine Tao surged forth in a scorching and dark manner. Great General Ling Ming let loose a blood-curdling wail as he stumbled back in retreat, and his holy sword stabbed toward Merlin. The angle, timing, and power of this sword strike were all impeccable. However, Merlin didn't retreat at this moment. Instead, he ignored Great General Ling Ming's attack and cackled with glee as he grabbed toward Great General Ling Ming's heart. The holy light sword pierced through Merlin's chest and pulverized him. At the same time, Merlin also plunged his hand into Great General Ling Ming's chest and crushed his heart. He was trading a life for a life. Ha ha! You're the ones who are going to die. I've been blessed by the heavens, and even if I don't have a heart, I can still receive the power of the heavens and reform my heart. Great General Ling Ming chortled with glee. Is that so? A ghastly hole had appeared in Merlin's chest, but his smile remained unchanged. Great General Ling Ming was suddenly struck by a sense of peril, and he wanted to retreat. However, boundless ghostly aura suddenly surged from Merlin's hand, sealing away his power. Great General Ling Ming faltered for a split second. It was in this short period of time that a huge white dog tore through the air and appeared behind Great General Ling Ming. It opened its massive mouth and viciously bit down toward Great General Ling Ming's head. Great General Ling Ming saw the sky darken, and in its place was a row of sharp teeth. Then, he felt an excruciating pain shoot through his neck, and he was plunged into boundless darkness. Heaven-crushing technique, heaven-swallowing dog. Woof! Dabai bit off Great General Ling Ming's head before swallowing it into his stomach. Hee hee, now that your head has been destroyed, do you think the heavens will reward you with a new head? A disdainful expression appeared on Merlin's face. Right at this moment, Cassidy reassembled her upper and lower body before charging toward Great General Ling Ming. She unleashed a sword projection that sliced Great General Ling Ming into over 10,000 pieces. Now that your body has been destroyed, do you think the heavens will reward you with a new life? Cassidy's expression was as cold as ice, and she sneered at the air. Dabai silently swallowed. As expected, these two lunatics were not to be trifled with. They were already dead, but they still didn't forget to sneer at the air. In less than a minute, a Heaven Pioneer stage Great General had been slain. Cassidy, Merlin, and Dabai didn't stop to rest. They immediately rushed toward their other teammates. Chapter 1543. Great General Ling Ming. The other 8 heavenly human tribe Great Generals' expressions shifted upon hearing this. Never would they have thought that they would be the first mighty figures to fall. Even without the enhancements of their combination spell formations, Heaven Pioneer stage heavenly human tribe mighty figures were invincible below the Tao integration stage. However, they were now being slain by a few returned to void stage mighty figures. Great General Shihua was hurling golden pebbles relentlessly, and they were like cannonballs hurtling toward the 3 handsome men and beautiful women in front of her with extremely fearsome might. If a mighty figure were to be struck by these golden rocks, they would be obliterated on the spot. However, Su Qianyun continued to evade the pebbles in this fearsome battle environment. She had brushed past death time and time again, but she was still able to maintain a level of composure that was far superior to that of a normal person. The moonlight disk drew out terrifying trajectories in the air, appearing and disappearing mysteriously, attacking the petrified marshal from all kinds of strange angles. In her battle state, Su Qianyun was never afraid. However, Great General Shihua was not an easy opponent to deal with. She was able to evade the moonlight disk with the most graceful movement techniques, and she was like a beautiful flower dancing in the wind. Boom! The air beside her suddenly exploded. An earth-shattering true intent imbued with destructive power erupted forth. Great General Shi Hua retreated in a disheveled manner. She was able to evade Su Qianyun's attacks with graceful movement techniques, but in the face of Xianyuan Cheng's ridiculous explosions, she was enraged to the point of wanting to kill him. It was also as she was retreating that a spatial ripple suddenly appeared on one of the flying rocks. A tall and slender young woman leaped out from the rubble with the "Send you safely on your way" sword in her hand. She hurtled through the air toward the great general's chest, leaving a dazzling silvery white trail in her wake. This attack was like a bolt of lightning. It was imbued with killing intent as soon as it appeared. Great General Shi Hua harumphed coldly as she gripped the air in front of her, upon which the space around her warped and compressed to the extreme. A burst of boundless will of the heavens forcibly stopped the dagger in its tracks. Bam! Yi Ling was blasted flying, but she quickly disappeared between heaven and earth, and no one knew where she had hidden herself. At this time, Su Qianyun's attack arrived in front of Marshal Shi Hua. The three of them had been completely powerless against the heavenly human tribe great generals in the past, but now they were able to hold their own against Great General Shi Hua. This was all thanks to the heaven-crushing techniques that were able to suppress the heavenly human tribe great generals. This was also why almost all of the mighty figures of the Kingdom of the Nine States had joined the heaven-crushing sect. As long as they could obtain the power to oppose the heavenly human tribe and defend the Kingdom of the Nine States, they were willing to make this sacrifice. The situation of the battle was not as one-sided as the marshals had expected. Only now did they deeply understand how ignorant and arrogant they were when they said those words earlier. Destroying the enemy in 1 minute, killing the enemy, and then helping the kami. They hadn't even eliminated the enemy yet, but the enemy had already eliminated one of their generals. Marshal Wu Ma was thinking of quickly getting rid of the two weaklings in front of him before going to support his other teammate. His opponent seemed to be the easiest to bully. His enemies were the two return-to-void stage sword immortals of the 4-9 immortal sect, Sun Yulua and Yao Mingxi. Slap! Great General Wu Ma slapped Yao Mingxi's flying sword aside before unleashing another punch, which sent Sun Yulua flying with blood gushing from his mouth. He stepped forward and instantly appeared before Sun Yulua like a streak of light. At the same time, white lightning revolved around his hand, and he was just about to press it down upon Sun Yulua's head. It was quite clear that he had already made up his mind to insta-kill his opponent. Little Meng! Sun Yulua yelled for help as the ancient sword in his hand glowed with a bright light. A blue child instantly appeared beside Wu Ma before wrapping his tongue around Sun Yulua's neck. At the same time, a bone-chilling voice traveled into Wu Ma's ears. "Your head fell off. Aren't you going to pick it up?" Wu Ma instinctively felt like there really was a head beneath his feet as he listened to that eerie and terrifying voice. He turned to look at the ground, only to find that it was the little boy's head. In that instant, Great General Wu Ma's neck was struck by the ancient sword like a bolt of lightning, and it was as if his head really was going to be severed into the ground in that instant. The Blue Dream Sword Spirit was most proficient in this combination of intimidation and assassination. However, he had still underestimated Great General Wu Ma's strength. In the instant that the ancient sword fell, Great General Wu Ma suddenly came to his senses, and a tough golden shell suddenly materialized around his neck. The ancient sword struck the shell, upon which dazzling sparks erupted. Wu Ma grabbed onto the Blue Dream Sword Spirit's tongue and tore it off before launching a punch toward the Blue Dream Sword Spirit's head. "Little Meng!" Sun Yulua yelled as he retreated. In the end, the Blue Dream Sword Spirit was blasted apart by Great General Wu Ma's fist. At this moment, Yao Mingxi swung his sword again. A thick shell also materialized around Wu Ma's hand, and he caught the sword blade with his bare hands. Yao Mingxi's heart jolted. At this moment, Wu Ma's other arm was like a saber, and it instantly severed the arm that was holding the sword. Ah! Yao Mingshi let loose a blood-curdling cry as he stumbled back in retreat. Sun Yulua charged forward again, only to be shattered by Wu Ma's fist, and he tumbled to the ground with blood gushing from his mouth. Humph, you're quite stubborn. Wu Ma glanced at the two of them and raised his fist. He was about to punch Wu Ma again and send him on his way. Right at this moment, a blood-red sword descended from the sky, and it was vast and boundlessly sharp. Great General Wu Ma's expression shifted drastically, and he immediately materialized a suit of armor to defend himself. This was the man who had slain Great General Ling Ming, so he had to take him seriously. Sun Yulua was on the verge of tears, as if he were grasping at straws. Cassidy, you're finally here to help us. There wasn't a single freak at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage, and he and Yao Mingshi weren't like Xian Yuan Cheng or Yi Ling. He and Yao Mingshi were basically stalling the Heavenly Human Tribe Great General with their lives on the line. Thankfully, Cassidy had killed the Heavenly Human Tribe Great General and arrived in time to provide reinforcements. Otherwise, he and Yao Mingshi would be dead meat. Elsewhere, the battle was taking place. Xiao Hong was trembling uncontrollably as she hid within the sun she had created. Meanwhile, Great General Qi Nan was frantically smashing her sun barrier. This was the first time Xiao Hong had been so cowardly. This was the first time she was facing an opponent who was comparable to a rookie Dao integration stage super mighty figure, and she didn't dare to face him head-on. Soon, Dabai and Merlin arrived to provide reinforcements. Xiao Hong finally dared to push her son toward Great General Qi Nan. The Fist Sage was still struggling to hold on. He was the #1 Return to Void stage cultivator under Nuwa's command, so he was able to just barely hold on against a Heavenly Human Tribe Great General. As for Bai Ling, she was beating up a Heavenly Human Tribe Great General on her own like a child. Tina was even more powerful. She was chasing after 3 Heavenly Human Tribe Great Generals. Chapter 1544. Tina was naturally unable to take care of 3 Heavenly Human Tribe Great Generals at the same time. Even if her combat prowess allowed for it, she wouldn't be able to deal with 3 Heavenly Human Tribe Great Generals at the same time. Hence, she released the Frost Dress Woman, who she had just trained, as well as the 3 other mighty figures in the Divine Mirror World, to hold off the other 2 Heavenly Human Tribe Great Generals. Then, she grabbed one of the Great Generals and bullied him with all her might. She had no choice. All of the other powerful beings in the Divine Mirror World were fighting on the front lines of the Kingdom of the 9 States. As the goddess of creation, she had no choice but to take matters into her own hands. However, as soon as she did, the Heavenly Human Tribe Great General Xing Zhou was scared ***less. One of Xing Zhou's arms was cleanly chopped off by Tina in the blink of an eye. He couldn't even keep up with Tina's movements. "Gary, come and help me." Xing Zhou knew very well that he was no match for this seemingly harmless little elf the moment they exchanged blows. He immediately shouted for help. Gary, who was currently fighting with the Frost Dress Woman, was the closest to the Star Continent. Upon hearing the call for help, he immediately rushed over to help. Thus, the battle became a battle between Great Marshals Xing Zhou and Gary and Tina and the Frost Dress Woman. Unfortunately, the 2 Great Marshals were once again crushed and forced into dire straits. "Yu Tao, come and help us!" Gary and Xing Zhou yelled in unison. Yu Tao had just defeated 3 Return to Void stage mighty figures from the Divine Mirror World, and she immediately joined the battle. How could Xing Zhou, Gary, and Yu Tao lose against Tina and the Frost Dress Woman? Less than a minute later, the 3 Great Generals were being chased around by Tina and the Frost Dress Woman again. They were astonished to discover that Tina was ridiculously powerful. If they were invincible below the Dao integration stage, then what about this Return to Void stage fairy who was chasing after them? Invincible below the Dao integration stage? She could go fight heavenly gods with that kind of power. Wasn't it obvious that he was bullying them by hanging out with them here? If the three great generals knew that Tina had injured heavenly goddess Lin Yu, they probably wouldn't be as astonished and incredulous as they were now. Even if they couldn't win, they would at least be more mentally prepared. The battle was still ongoing, but they were gradually unable to hold on. The Frost Dress Woman was a bona fide mighty figure at the Return to Void pinnacle stage, and she floated around the three great generals like a ghost. Instead of hanging onto one tree, she would hang onto all three of them. Her spells were also unpredictable. Most of them were mind-affecting or binding spells, so they could be considered top-notch binding spells. The Frost Dress Woman gave Tina a very good environment to deal damage in. Tina had transformed into a goddess of slaughter. She was clearly a petite and adorable little fairy, but none of the great generals dared to look down on her when she wielded her immortal sword. All of them shuddered involuntarily upon hearing her say, "Divine technique times. If it wasn't for the fact that they were hoping to stall for time and wait for the reinforcements from the other marshals, they would have fled for their lives long ago. Why would they still be struggling here? Do you like me?" A light voice drifted over. Xing Zhou felt a chill run down his spine. His body instantly felt like it was in extreme winter, and his movements began to slow down. F***ck off. Flames of rage burned in his eyes as he swung his arm behind him like a dragon. Hee. The Frost Dress Woman chuckled softly as her clothes fluttered in the wind. Her body flew backward in the face of Great General Xing Zhou's attack. Right at the instant that Xing Zhou attacked, Tina's golden wings flapped, and specks of golden light appeared as her body disappeared on the spot. In the next instant, she had already appeared before Xing Zhou. Her heart lotus ice sword tore through the air like a flash of blue light as it stabbed toward his throat. Xing Zhou. Yu Tao wielded her pure white holy spear and unleashed an explosive slash to parry Tina's attack. The shock waves from the slash instantly tore a massive fissure that extended for over 10 kilometers into the ground. Yu Tao's all-out attack had finally saved Xing Zhou's life. However, it was also at this moment that she felt an indescribable chill on her cheek. A pair of slender blue hands were caressing her cheeks from behind. A head was resting on her arm as a pursed lips chuckled. Big sister is so crude and violent. It'll be very unclassy." An extreme chill instantly enveloped her entire body. At this moment, even her thoughts had slowed down. Not only could the Frost Dress Woman bind someone on a physical level, but she could also interfere with them on a mental level. The little fairy grasped this opportunity once again. Her blue immortal sword whooshed toward Yu Tao. In her current state, Yu Tao was completely unable to dodge this attack. Death surged through her entire body like a tidal wave. "Yu Tao!" Gary cried out in alarm. His fists were enveloped in holy light as he ferociously smashed them toward Tina's immortal sword, deflecting her attack. Gary's all-out attack had finally saved Yu Tao's life. At this moment, Gary, who had just made his move, felt a chill run down his spine. Hee, big brother, your figure is so good. The Frost Dress Woman's soft and seductive voice traveled over. She wrapped her arms around Gary's waist in a seductive manner. Tina grasped this opportunity and stabbed her sword toward Gary. A look of despair appeared on Gary's face. He felt like he was about to die. "Gary!" Xing Zhou let loose a cry of surprise as he kicked Tina's immortal sword away. Xing Zhou's all-out attack had finally saved Gary's life. Then, the Frost Dress Woman suddenly floated behind Xing Zhou. "Yu Tao!" "Gary!" Xing Zhou, the three great generals of the heavenly human tribe, took turns being chased by Tina. They had to save each other time and time again, and they were on the brink of death time and time again. They felt like this battle was far too thrilling. How could it be so terrifying? They were the three great generals of the heavenly human tribe. How could they be surrounded by a fairy? Did she have to be so stimulating? If you always stood by the river, your shoes would always get wet. If you always hovered on the brink of death, you would always have your limit. After a short while, Tina stabbed her heart lotus ice sword toward Gary again. Gary! Yu Tao hurriedly protected him. Her spear was like a dragon as it stabbed toward Tina. However, Tina had experienced so many assassination attempts and had definitely improved. She had actually held back a trick up her sleeve. The blade of her sword was tilted like an antelope's horn, and its sword intent was ethereal and unfathomable. Divine technique, heaven's severing sword flash. The blade of her sword was pointed toward Yu Tao. It was as if everything had become natural and a fixed pattern. Thus, Yu Tao never would have imagined that Tina would turn her spear toward her at this critical moment. Tina's petite body dodged Yu Tao's spear. Her sword flashed extremely quickly, and the true intent of heaven's severing sword flash suppressed the power bestowed upon her by the heavens. The blade of Tina's sword grew larger and larger in Yu Tao's eyes. Eventually, it took up her entire field of vision. The heart lotus ice sword pierced through Yu Tao's head at lightning speed, and its cold power destroyed her vitality. Yu Tao! Yu Tao! Xing Zhou and Gary yelled at the same time. A boundless chill started to rise in their hearts. They suddenly realized that with Yu Tao's death, their situation had gone from hell to certain death. Chapter 1545. Xing Zhou and Gary felt like they were about to die. They wanted to call for help from their companions, only to discover that all of their companions were also engaged in arduous battles. They could only pin their hopes on the two heavenly gods. It had to be said that the power of divine heaven stage powerhouses was indeed terrifying. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu and Heavenly God Jordan were more than enough to take on 5 Tao integration stage super mighty figures. In particular, Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was completely invincible as she disregarded the Phoenix's attacks and stomped down on Lin with her white crystal shoes, as if she were a paramount goddess stomping down on an ant. The ground within a radius of hundreds of thousands of meters caved in from her stomp. The Phoenix didn't think that Lin would be beaten to the ground so quickly, and it finally unleashed its trump card. Its gargantuan wings abruptly spread open, and divine flames surged for over 50 kilometers, incinerating the heavens. A golden spell formation appeared in front of the Phoenix, from which an ancient and boundless aura emanated. Flaming feathers rained down from the sky. The Phoenix's prideful divine Tao and heaven-crushing true intent fused perfectly in that instant before exploding forth with a resounding boom. Golden divine flames erupted like pillars of light, hanging in the crimson heavens like a golden rainbow. Extremely high temperatures instantly incinerated the surrounding space. Wheel of life and death, heaven-crushing nirvana flames. Little Huang was a mythological beast that had died once, and after its reincarnation, it was able to better understand what death was and what the cycle between life and death was. When the Phoenix's heaven-crushing intent and nirvana intent fused together, there was a hint of vitality imbued within the destruction, as if it was incomplete. However, it was exactly this hint of vitality that made the will of the heavenly Tao resist Little Huang's attack less violently, thereby weakening the power of the heavens. The heaven-crushing nirvana flames crashed down upon Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's blue barrier, and it was completely kept at bay by the barrier. However, a burst of heaven-crushing intent soon tore at the barrier with unstoppable force. At the same time, there was a burst of vitality imbued within the destruction that was constantly tearing at the barrier in an attempt to discover its G-spot. The barrier that was imbued with the will of the heavens and could keep all powers at bay suddenly began to show signs of being overwhelmed. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was initially not paying much heed to the Phoenix's attack, but her eyes abruptly widened at this moment, and she immediately withdrew her gravity stomp before dodging to the side. The blue barrier began to distort and then melt. Rumble! Divine flames swept toward Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. Bzzz! The white divine halo on his left wrist began to spin madly. Even though Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu had already raised her speed to the extreme, she was still unable to completely evade the Phoenix's heaven-crushing nirvana flames. The flames burned all the way from her side, tearing her white dress and burning her slender jade-like arms red and even charred. In the end, a wisp of hidden power instantly stripped all of the vitality from Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's arm, reducing it to the tiniest inky black particles. Phoenix was disappointed to see this. It thought that it would be able to burn the other party to death in one go, but it didn't expect that it would only burn off an arm. This was a huge loss. One had to know that this attack was its strongest move against the heavens. This was the perfect opportunity for Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu to ignore its spell techniques and focus on Enlin. It thought that it had grasped the perfect timing. It could only blame Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's freakish reflexes and speed. The Phoenix was very disappointed, but Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was extremely shocked and enraged. My defenses have been broken? How is it that one or two of you can break through my defense? That's impossible. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu hurriedly retreated with incredulity etched on her face as she stared intently at the Phoenix. The Phoenix raised its proud head and looked up at Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu with a disdainful expression. In its eyes, there was no one it couldn't mess with aside from Xiaolan, even heavenly gods. Time flew by, and 1 minute passed by in the blink of an eye. Lin Yu took a deep breath. The threat she had made had failed to materialize once again. She had been struck by 2 incredible attacks in a row, and her face had become a little red and swollen. A green divine halo imbued with boundless vitality appeared on her back. Life of green. Lin Yu raised her head and spoke in an indifferent voice. Her 6th divine halo appeared, and boundless vitality began to flow into her body. Her arm had clearly been incinerated by the Phoenix, but countless cells were rapidly growing and regenerating at a rate discernible to the naked eye. When the Phoenix saw this scene, it couldn't accept it. This was equivalent to erasing all the credit for releasing the King Bomb. It immediately blasted forth a torrential divine flame waterfall imbued with the power of fire as it hurtled toward the heavenly god nearby. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was just about to unleash a movement technique to evade. All of a sudden, golden lightning tore through the air, illuminating heaven and earth with a pure golden light. A man in a golden void lightning battle robe appeared at an extremely terrifying speed to seal off her path of retreat. Enlin. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's expression shifted once again, and she immediately ignored the Phoenix's attack as she focused all of her attention on Enlin. She turned around and unleashed a punch with the power of metal. Enlin appeared like a bolt of lightning, and his fist was enshrouded in the power of lightning as it crashed down upon Lin Yu. Boom! The 2 fists collided. Heaven and earth instantly fell silent. Explosive lightning instantly pulverized the space within a radius of over 50 kilometers. Just the shock waves from the collision of the 2 fists were enough to shatter the Phoenix's divine flame attack. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's left arm had already been enshrouded by the power of metal, and the paramount power and will of the heavenly Tao had been injected into her fist. The will of the heavens was the paramount law of this world. If the heavens said that her fist could destroy everything, then it definitely could. However, the power of the heavens was no longer absolute. This was because the man standing before her also possessed a similar absolute power. In fact, the golden lightning divine halo above his head was even purer than her divine halo. It was as if 2 heavens were fighting. One of them said, "I'm the most bad *SS. I can destroy everything with a single punch." The other said, "I'm the most bad *SS. I can destroy everything with a single punch." Both of them were the absolute wills of the heavens, and a conflict had erupted between them. The one who wielded the paramount power of the heavenly gods was gradually gaining the upper hand. The power of the heavenly gods was the absolute law. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was astonished to discover that a burst of paramount lightning had already torn through her power of metal and pulverized her fist. She activated the power of all 6 divine halos almost instinctively and injected them into her fist at the same time. Boom, boom, boom. power imbued with absolute will stacked on top of one another before crashing down with mountain-toppling force. If one, I'm the most bad *SS, will won't do, then what if I say 6 times? You only have one divine halo, and you only have a 40-60 chance of winning against me. If I amplify my will by 6 times, what are you going to do? Chapter 1546. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was going all out this time. With each divine halo that she obtained, her basic attributes would increase explosively. However, the core power of each divine halo had its own function. This was a natural law. When she forcibly combined the powers of all of the divine halos to form the same type of intent, she would receive unparalleled power, but she would also suffer extremely terrifying backlash from the heavenly Tao. Lin Yu didn't really care. She was going to suffer backlash from the heavenly Tao anyway, so what if there was more backlash? As long as she could kill this man who refused to be her friend as quickly as possible, everything would be worth it. Die. Boundless golden light burst forth from Lin Yu's fist with the power of her 6 divine halos, and it completely suppressed Lin's golden void lightning before pushing it forward. Lin could feel the power surging through his fist at an insane rate. Bursts of power stacked on top of one another, and it was as if the entire heavens were crashing down upon him from the 1st level to the 6th level. The invincible golden void lightning was being suppressed by the 6th level intent of the heavenly Tao, and a searing pain erupted from his fist before spreading throughout his entire body. The power surged through his body and straight into his consciousness, as if it were trying to destroy his entire being. Bam! The power completely exploded. Lin was blasted flying for tens of thousands of meters, and he only managed to avoid being obliterated by the power of his body of the war god. However, even though he had managed to hold on, his bodily functions were already on the brink of shattering. He's not dead yet? Astonishment and confusion appeared in Lin Yu's eyes again. She wasn't a person who liked to waste her breath, and she immediately stepped into the air before charging toward Lin at an even more terrifying speed, upon which she launched another punch toward Lin. If one punch couldn't kill him, then 2 punches. Lin was most afraid of enemies like this who didn't speak much. They didn't give him any time to catch his breath or bluff his way through. The golden lightning divine halo instantly transformed into a white divine halo of flowing wind, and its aura also became ethereal and unfathomable. Wind, he spoke in an indifferent voice. A gentle white divine light erupted from the divine halo before merging into heaven and earth. Under the illumination of the divine light, Lin's body became more and more illusory, and even the essence of his life began to change. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu unleashed a punch that was imbued with the power of her 6 divine halos toward Lin. The power of metal, speed, defense, and life force combined together to unleash a devastating attack, instantly shattering a large chunk of the heavens and raising a mountain range over 500 kilometers away to the ground. Lin's body was also pulverized into nothingness by this punch. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu slowly withdrew her fist and was just about to heave a sigh of relief when she suddenly felt like something was amiss. This was her instinctive intuition as a heavenly god. That's not right. What I hit isn't a living being. There's no feeling of an expert dying, she frowned slightly. Could it be that I hit the air with all my strength? To be able to use an escape technique right under her nose without anyone noticing just how terrifying was his strength? The power of wind? To be able to fool even me, it must be this ability. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu looked around at the empty space around her and harumphed coldly. An orange divine halo suddenly appeared around her slender neck, upon which a peculiar power proliferated through the air and enshrouded heaven and earth. Everything in the world became incomparably real in her eyes. Nothing could hide from her perception and probing. Everything was displayed in its most realistic form in her eyes. 7th Divine Halo, Eternal Reality. She looked around, and a vibrant yet playful smile suddenly appeared on her flawless features. Found you. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu glowered at a certain spot in the air. All transformations and transformations would be restored to their most fundamental state under the power of her seventh divine halo. Space tremored as divine power surged. A figure was forced to appear between heaven and earth again. At this moment, he was pouring immortal pills into his mouth, 6 of them at once. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. This was the first time Lin Yu had seen an enemy gulping down pills in such a frenzied manner. The power of 6 immortal pills was already the upper limit of what Lin's body could handle. Any more than that and he wouldn't be able to digest it. The 6 immortal pills combined with the power of the evergreen technique could allow Lin to recover from his injuries at an extremely fast rate, thereby allowing him to fight for a longer period of time. An awkward smile appeared on Lin's face at the sight of Lin Yu's flabbergasted expression. Lin Yu, should we take a break? Boom. A terrifying aura surged violently. Lin Yu appeared before Lin in the blink of an eye, and her fist, which was imbued with the power of her seventh divine halo, crashed down upon Lin's body at the same time. This attack was even more terrifying than the one Lin had endured before. However, Lin had his reasons for choosing to use the power of wind against Lin. This time, Lin Yu's fist landed on Lin's body, but it was kept at bay by the gust of wind around his body. Wind could be as violent as a hurricane, but it could also be as gentle as a spring breeze. It was a combination of strength and gentleness. When the unstoppable fist struck the wind, it could break through the power of wind in an extremely violent manner, but at the same time, the wind could also push Lin back in retreat. The fist passed through the wind, but it also imbued the wind with a burst of power. This power pushed Lin back in retreat, thereby giving Lin enough time to face the fist, which had been weakened by the power of wind. That's right, Lin had never planned to face this attack head-on. Instead, he was planning to use his enemy's power to help him evade her attack. Thanks to his divine inspection technique and his heavenly wind power, he was finally able to just barely keep up with Lin Yu's punches, which had been hampered by the ball of wind. He stepped into the air, and his body shifted to the side. The power of Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's fist brushed past his shoulder before pulverizing the space behind him. Lin could also sense that death had brushed past him in that instant. Battling with such an existence was extremely frightening. They didn't know what kind of power they would face in the next second, and the slightest carelessness would result in the destruction of both body and soul. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was a little surprised. She clearly didn't expect Lin to have evaded her attack even with her 7 divine halos activated. This was even more frustrating than Lin blocking her fist. Die, die, die. Lin Yu's movement technique flashed through the air again, and her fists roared with the might of the heavens. Lin used his heavenly wind power to materialize a cushioning barrier around his body to evade Lin Yu's attacks again and again. Even though he was in a perilous situation, he was still able to survive. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu wanted to kill him with all her might. Meanwhile, he was evading her attacks with all his might. It wasn't that he wasn't resisting, it was just that Lin had his own plans. The more he used the power of his divine halos, the more powerful the backlash of the heavenly Tao would be. Lin had already experienced this during this battle. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was becoming more and more powerful, but at the same time, her body was already being overworked, and there was bound to be a moment where it would collapse. Furthermore, the black, decaying area on her wrist had already spread to half her forearm. Even her green divine halo was unable to heal this kind of injury. At this moment, Lin realized that he could wear down Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu to death. Chapter 1547. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu had initially held the upper hand, but due to Lin's unleashing of the power of the wind lightning heavenly gods, the situation had taken a drastic turn for the worse. On the contrary, Heavenly God Jordan's battle had finally taken a drastic turn. Heavenly God Jordan had been fighting steadily this entire time, and he finally unleashed a torrential barrage of attacks. Each and every one of his attacks was capable of shattering heaven and earth. It turned out that he had been conserving his strength and accumulating it all this time. Only now did he truly unleash it. Heavenly God Jordan's divine halo was of the same type as Lin Yu's, but it was used in a different way. Lin Yu was mostly violent and direct, while Jordan was unpredictable and ever-changing. A white-haired man stood proudly on the ground. 6 divine rings surrounded his hands, feet, waist, and back. Divine light surged, making him look extremely gorgeous and noble. The celestial Dharch threw out one imperial seal after another, each of which contained an earth-shattering divine might. Black Spirit Snake was the most violent of them all. She raised her golden sword high into the air, and a heaven-crushing sword intent pierced through the clouds for over 150 kilometers before slashing down upon the heavenly god. White Spirit Snake had mastered yin and yang, and each of her sword strikes was lethal. In the face of the combined attacks of 3 super mighty figures at the Tao integration pinnacle stage, Heavenly God Jordan no longer chose to play it safe. Instead, he unleashed his power to the extreme, and his divine might was powerful enough to shake the heavens. Golden Blade Manifestation. He spread his arms, and the divine ring on his wrist shone as bright as the sun. Countless golden swords appeared around him, cutting and spreading in all directions like a storm. Not only was the power of the golden blade shocking, but it also had the power to cut through everything in its sharpness. The celestial Thearka's divine symbols were pulverized by the golden light. Black Spirit Snake's massive sword was sliced in half, and White Spirit Snake's yin and yang dual swords were in a perilous situation due to the sheer number of golden blades. Just a single strike had vanquished the attacks of 3 Tao integration stage super mighty figures. Jordan didn't stop there. Almost at the exact same moment, the purple divine halo around his feet lit up with a bewitching light, and he raised a foot before kicking it into the sky. This movement was like a professional dancer standing in a split. A dignified heavenly deity making this kind of action could not help but be a little strange. However, a purple sphere shot out from his foot and flew into the sky. The sphere was not big, only the size of a human head. However, when the ball began to glow with purple light, the celestial Dharch, Black Spirit Snake, and White Spirit Snake were all struck by an omnipresent gravitational force, as if it were the origin of the world, and everything in this world had to draw closer to it. Heavenly gravitational attraction. Rumble. A power so strong that it was hard to resist suddenly acted on the 3 of them. Their bodies involuntarily flew towards the purple ball, unable to resist at all. It was as if the rules of the world were as it should be, and everything was right and proper. Jordan's expression remained unchanged, and the white divine ring on his left wrist suddenly released a burst of energy that enveloped his entire body, upon which he disappeared on the spot. All of the combatants knew that Heavenly God Jordan hadn't disappeared. Instead, his speed had reached an unimaginable level. In the next instant, he appeared before Black Spirit Snake, and his 2 fingers stabbed toward Black Spirit Snake's heart like a bolt of lightning. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was using the power of her speed divine halo to evade the attacks. As for Heavenly God Jordan, he was using his speed divine halo to attack. This was the most direct and purest form of attack. Extremely high speed resulted in extremely high kinetic energy. He could unleash the power of a single type of divine halo in an extremely precise manner, thereby allowing him to achieve miraculous results. Of course, the prerequisite for this was that one of his divine halos had a suppressive effect on his enemies. If he were up against a pure heavenly god like Enlin, then this technique would not work. Black Spirit Snake was already being restricted by the power of the heavenly gravitational attraction, and she was forced to fly toward the purple ball. Now that Heavenly God Jordan was attacking her at an extremely high speed, there was no way she could evade his attack, and she could only just barely hold her massive sword in front of her. Thankfully, the blade of the sword was quite wide, so it was like a shield, thereby reducing the margin for error. In this dire situation, she finally managed to place her divine tool in front of Heavenly God Jordan's fingers. Heavenly God's spear. Jordan's fingers stabbed forth mercilessly, and the massive divine tool sword let loose a sharp screeching sound as a terrifying power passed through the sword and directly struck Black Spirit Snake's body. PFFF. Black Spirit Snake felt as if she had been struck by a sledgehammer, and she hurtled back in retreat with blood gushing from her mouth. Big sister. White Spirit Snake let loose a cry of surprise, and she immediately waved her Een-type divine sword to freeze the space around Heavenly God Jordan in an attempt to restrict his movements. At the same time, her Yang-type divine sword slashed through heaven and earth with the power of extreme Yang. A faint smile appeared on Heavenly God Jordan's face, and the divine halo around his waist glowed with a scintillating light, instantly materializing a blue shield. Bam! White Spirit Snake's sword projection fell upon the shield, but it was as if it had struck the hardest material in the world. It was unable to penetrate any further, and it could only continue to unleash its power on the outside. Heavenly God Jordan stepped lightly onto the ground, and the power of his heavenly gravitational attraction suddenly increased explosively again. White Spirit Snake let loose a light cry, and her petite body squirmed and struggled, but her body was still involuntarily drawn toward the purple ball. In the blink of an eye, Jordan had already appeared before White Spirit Snake, and a cold smile appeared on his face as he prepared to unleash an almighty fist. Bam! The purple ball suddenly exploded. The celestial Dharch was still in his attacking stance, and an imperial seal flashed over his palm as a determined expression appeared on his face. Heavenly God Jordan faltered slightly upon seeing this. In the instant that White Spirit Snake regained her freedom, she quickly slashed her Yin and Yang swords toward 13 of Heavenly God Jordan's openings. Heavenly God Jordan's fist was evaded by White Spirit Snake's extremely agile and slender waist, and at the same time, her Yin and Yang swords fell mercilessly. White Spirit Snake took advantage of this opportunity to retaliate, and she instantly unleashed the true intent of her Yin and Yang sword Dao. Yin and Yang revolved, and all things were born and destroyed as a divine tool domain erupted forth. At that moment, Heavenly God Jordan was dragged into a unique world that was composed of only black and white colors, and a boundless sword strike swept forth, each and every one of which seemed to be capable of parting heaven and earth. In the face of White Spirit Snake's torrential retaliation, Heavenly God Jordan's expression remained calm, and he hurriedly defended himself, but a series of wounds of different depths were inflicted upon his body. 3 seconds later, a 7th orange divine halo appeared around his neck, and the battle took another drastic turn. White Spirit Snake's frenzied attacks were unable to wound Heavenly God Jordan. Instead, Heavenly God Jordan took advantage of an opening, and his fingers punctured her chest like spears as crimson blood splattered through the air. The divine tool domain had been broken. White Spirit Snake threw up a mouthful of blood as she hurtled back in retreat. Jordan was just about to give chase. The celestial Dharch descended from the sky, and his golden imperial seal enshrouded the heavens as it crashed down with boundless divine might. Bam! Heavenly God Jordan was crushed into the ground by the gargantuan imperial seal. Chapter 1548. The celestial Dharch possessed a power similar to Heavenly God Jordan's, and he could also borrow the power of the heavens to attack his opponents. In fact, he was even more powerful than Heavenly God Jordan when it came to manipulating the heavens. Heavenly Realm Suppression. The celestial Dharch roared as the golden imperial seal in his hand lit up the heavens. Not only was it extremely powerful, but it was also imbued with the absolute sealing power bestowed upon it by the heavenly Tao. The golden imperial seal was like a 5-fingered divine mountain, and the golden energy radiating from it was imbued with boundless weight, sealing away all powers, including the power of the heavens descending from the sky. Thus, it was able to suppress the white-haired man down below. Even the most powerful heavenly gods of the heavenly human tribe had to bow their heads to the celestial Tharch. Heavenly God Jordan was pressed into the ground, but there was still no hint of rage on his face. His personality was very different from Lin Yu's. Lin Yu was quite violent while he was more composed. Even though he was being crushed into the ground by the celestial Thearka's heavenly realm, he didn't do anything out of line. All he did was activate his 8th divine halo. A red divine halo appeared over heavenly God Jordan's heart. In contrast to the other divine halos, this red divine halo was completely stationary. The other 7 divine rings were constantly revolving. Only the red divine ring was frozen where his heart was. It was completely motionless, as if it had been jammed. It was extremely out of place. If it weren't for the fact that this stationary divine halo was still exuding a divine light, the celestial Tharch would be wondering if this was a fake divine halo. Heavenly God Jordan lay on the ground with the imperial seal crushing his body, and the sound of bones cracking could already be heard. However, his golden eyes narrowed slightly, as if there was a hint of a smile hidden within them. He gripped his hand, and the power of his golden divine halo converged into a sharp golden light that appeared over his palm. "You can still use your power?" The celestial Thearka's expression shifted slightly, and he immediately increased the intensity of his suppression. "Humph, even if you can use your power, you won't be able to do anything to me." Heavenly God Jordan was still smiling, and he held the wisp of golden light in his hand before gently sweeping it across the imperial seal. The celestial Tharch felt a stinging pain shoot through his palm, as if he had been sliced open. For some reason, the celestial Tharch suddenly had a bad feeling. However, before he had a chance to react, Heavenly God Jordan viciously stabbed that golden streak of light into his own heart. White blood gushed forth, staining the red divine halo on his chest white. The celestial Tharch was stunned. What did that mean? Did he commit suicide because he knew he had no chance of winning? If his enemies were trash like soul-piercing stage generals, he might actually believe him. But now, his opponent was in existence at the peak of the celestial clan. How could he commit suicide? This matter was definitely not that simple. It was also at this moment that the celestial Tharch discovered that Heavenly God Jordan was still maintaining his gentle smile, and his voice was tinged with a hint of coldness. "My life is already connected to yours. What are you going to do if I stab my own heart?" "What nonsense are you spouting?" The celestial Thearka's expression darkened. Actually, he recalled the piercing pain that came from his palm when he used the Heavenly Dipper realm. Could it be, at this moment, the divine halo around Heavenly God Jordan's chest suddenly began to revolve? The blood-red divine light was like a shining star. Sometimes it was extremely bright, and sometimes it was extremely dim. Plop! The celestial Thearka's heart skipped a beat. Immediately afterward, he was struck by a piercing pain in his heart. His heart, which was beating at an abnormal rate, began to crack open from the inside out. In the end, a gaping wound appeared on his skin, from which blood gushed forth. Pfff! The celestial Tharch threw up a mouthful of blood, and he stared at Heavenly God Jordan with astonishment etched on his face. He almost couldn't even maintain his imperial seal, and he could feel his vitality quickly flowing away from his body. "Are you very surprised? Are you very confused?" A hint of mockery appeared on Heavenly God Jordan's face for the first time. "You've only been sealed. Do you really think I can't kill you? This is the power of karma." The celestial Tharch stared at Heavenly God Jordan with a grave expression. "This is the power of karma, right?" Heavenly God Jordan turned to the celestial Tharch with a hint of surprise on his face. "I've been discovered. There's no harm in telling you. My 8th divine halo is a curse of karma. Once I establish a connection with it, I'll be able to do whatever I want to you." The golden blade projection in Jordan's hand sliced into his own heart, upon which pure white blood gushed forth. The celestial Tharch let loose a muffled groan, and he felt as if his heart was being pulverized as well. His golden and white imperial robe was instantly stained red, and agony surged through his body like a tidal wave as his vitality quickly crumbled. Disaster sharing is the most powerful and direct technique of the curse of karma. I can inflict harm upon my own life force to contact you and inflict harm upon you as well. Heavenly God Jordan chuckled as he sliced off his own arm after pulverizing his own heart. At this moment, the celestial Thearcha's arm was also struck by some kind of mystical power, upon which a clean and smooth incision suddenly appeared on his shoulder. Blood gushed forth, and his arm was completely severed. A single flap of a butterfly's wings could whip up devastating gale-force winds from hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. This was the butterfly effect, and it was the result of countless karma stacking on top of one another. However, the divine halo of the curse of karma could forcibly establish a karmic connection between two completely unrelated lifeforms through the use of a supreme curse. Everything that one party did would have a 100% effect on the other party, and the more powerful one was, the more powerful this effect would be. Disaster sharing was a direct connection between both parties, so the feedback was the most severe, and it was also the easiest to break through the enemy's defenses. This technique could transform, because I hit you, so you will be injured, into, because I hit myself, so you will be injured. On the battlefield, the celestial Thearcha's arm was severed, and his celestial Dharch seal also crumbled at this moment. The heavenly Dipper realm was destroyed, and heavenly God Jordan regained his freedom with a victorious smile on his face. He stood up, and the green divine halo behind him began to glow with a scintillating light. Terrifying regenerative power surged through his entire body, reconnecting his severed arm while quickly healing his shattered heart. A faint smile appeared on heavenly God Jordan's face. We're both going to suffer the same amount of damage, but I won't die in the end. You'll be the one to die. If it weren't for the fact that the celestial Dharch was so powerful, he wouldn't have resorted to such a self-mutilation method. Heavenly God Jordan raised his golden blade high into the air. This time, the blade's power had been completely unleashed. Not only had its physical damage increased to the maximum, but even its mental damage had also become extremely terrifying. If the celestial Dharch were to accept this attack without putting up any resistance, then he would definitely be killed. The smile on heavenly God Jordan's face remained unchanged as he stabbed his golden blade directly toward the celestial Thearcha's head. Now, it's time for the celestial Dharch to die. Chapter 1549. Heavenly God Jordan had already sentenced the celestial Dharch to death. At this moment, Black Spirit Snake had already sprung into action, and she flew toward Heavenly God Jordan at an extremely fast speed. She appeared before Heavenly God Jordan almost instantly, and a boundless golden light burst forth from her realm creation evil vanquishing sword as it fell upon the white-haired man. Hee, you're trying to interrupt me? How naive. Heavenly God Jordan's smile remained unchanged as the blue divine halo around his waist created a barrier that could keep all powers at bay. Black Spirit Snake's sword was unable to break through Jordan's defenses in a short time. Just as Heavenly God Jordan was confident in his victory, a figure in a white robe flew toward the celestial Dharch at an even faster speed. Celestial Dharch, let me help you. White Spirit Snake wielded her yin and yang dual swords and flew as fast as lightning. Heavenly God Jordan still wore a cold smile on his face. Everything they did now was futile. The golden blade projection was about to pierce through his head and consciousness. The celestial Dharch had no other choice but to pin his hopes on White Spirit Snake. He stared at the woman flying toward him as she thrust her sword toward him. Wait, he's going to deliver a sword strike? The celestial Dharch faltered momentarily, and White Spirit Snake had already severed his other arm. Blood splattered across the sky. The single-armed Heavenly Emperor became a Heavenly Emperor without arms. The scene was very tragic. The air suddenly became quiet. The celestial Dharch, black spirit snake, and heavenly god Jordan all stared at the beautiful woman with astonishment on their faces. The woman grinned and sheathed her sword. Done. Done? Settle what? The celestial Dharch was completely dumbfounded. Could it be that white spirit snake decided to kill me first in order to prevent me from being killed by the enemy? This way they would be able to successfully stop the evil plan of the enemy. This was indeed a very good way to deal with it. F***CKU. What a lunatic. Moreover, if she wanted to kill me, why didn't she chop off my head? Why did she chop off my arms? At this moment, heavenly god Jordan had already stabbed his golden blade into his own head, upon which blood and brain matter gushed forth. His screams finally resounded through the clouds. This strike was not only the end on the physical level, but also the end on the spiritual level. It's over. If I lose control, all of the living beings here are going to die. The celestial Thearcha's face was deathly pale. 10 seconds later, heavenly god Jordan was still wailing with anguish, but the Sky Sovereign was safe and sound. Black Spirit Snake turned toward the celestial Dharch with a hint of surprise on her face. The celestial Dharch turned to White Spirit Snake with excitement in his eyes. What's going on? According to the karmic feedback, the celestial Dharch had long since passed the time limit, but he was still completely unharmed. White Spirit Snake smiled. When you used the celestial Dharch seal, heavenly god Jordan forcibly established a connection with you through your spell technique. He planted the karma origin in your right hand, so I cut off his karma origin. Naturally, everything will be fine. The celestial Dharch finally saw the light. The reasoning behind it was simple. However, being able to see the source of karma and accurately sever it was extremely difficult. He couldn't help but take another look at the woman with a sweet smile in front of him. The celestial Dharch still remembered that White Spirit Snake had personally severed heavenly goddess Lin Yu's connection with the heavenly Tao during their battle. This woman was quite a force to be reckoned with. The screams were still echoing. Heavenly god Jordan was currently in an extremely awkward situation. He stabbed himself so hard that he was half dead, but the Sky Emperor was completely fine. He was about to throw up blood. What kind of sin had he committed for something like this to happen? He shouldn't have come up with such an idiotic strategy. No wonder White Spirit Snake didn't help the celestial Dharch establish the connection. She was waiting for this moment. The green divine halo was unleashing healing techniques in a frenzy to heal heavenly god Jordan's injuries. Peculiar smiles appeared on the faces of the celestial Dharch, Black Spirit Snake, and White Spirit Snake at the same time. Celestial Dharch Finger. Heaven-shattering sword. Yin-yang sword lightning. The three super mighty figures at the Tao integration pinnacle stage unleashed their most powerful spell techniques at the same time, which crashed into heavenly god Jordan's blue barrier. Terrifying energy surged forth, plowing through the ground within a radius of several hundred kilometers. A small hill was also very innocently flattened. A black-haired girl in a colorful puffy skirt, revealing her fair and well-proportioned legs, was forced to take a few steps back by the energy impact. Then, she forcibly stopped herself. Her crimson high heels with little wings on them had sunk deep into the ground, and her petite body was slightly hunched over, as if she were trying to obstruct her vision. Her large, lively eyes were fixed on the battle taking place up ahead, and she appeared to be very eager. She had already received a lot of pleasant surprises. She had witnessed the heavenly human tribe Divine Heaven stage in action and experienced the power of the will of the heavens. She had witnessed so many return to void stage mighty figures with limitless potential in battle. She had witnessed the celestial Dharch and the others unleash extremely powerful spell technique. Most importantly, she was greeted by the sight of Lin who had been resurrected. This was simply a huge surprise. If it weren't for the fact that they were on different sides, she would be tempted to give him a hug. However, she refrained from doing so. If she were to step forward now, she would be dragging the southern heavenly wing nation down with her. The Southern Heavenly Wing Nation had always stood aloof from worldly affairs, and she couldn't allow it to be destroyed just because of her stance. This was her responsibility, as she was the 9-colored divine vermilion bird of the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation. Unlin, you're already so powerful. A hint of a blush appeared on the vermilion bird princess features, and she was a little nervous as she prayed in a quiet voice. If you're this powerful, we'll be able to unleash all of our powers in the future. So, please don't die. On the Heavenly Human Tribe Great General Battlefield. 5 minutes had finally passed. Bai Ling's formation disruptor had completely run out of energy. All of the Heaven Pioneer stage Great Generals could now use their 3-man combination spell formation again, and each 3-man team could unleash power comparable to that of a veteran Dao integration stage super mighty figure. Get into formation, Great General Miya yelled. Come here. Xing Zhou wailed with anguish. Save me. Great General Wu Ma yelled for help. Get into formation. Pua. Great General Shihua's chest was punctured by Xian Yuan Qing. It's over. Great General Zhua Yi was in despair. Only now did Miya discover that they had no chance of getting into formation. All of the great generals had already fallen into a quagmire, and the only fate awaiting them was death. Of the 9 Heavenly Human Tribe great generals, only 5 remained, and they had been split up in different locations, so there was no way they could turn the tables. Never would the high and mighty great generals have thought that they would suffer such a crushing defeat, and their opponents were a bunch of return-to-void stage mighty figures. Ah! Great General Xing Zhou let loose a blood-curdling wail as he was sliced in half by Tina. At this point, Xing Zhou, Gary, and Yu Tao, the 3 great marshals who were fighting against Little Fairy, had all fallen. Chapter 1550. Explosions were erupting incessantly somewhere on the ground. A series of sharp, murderous flowers were blooming in the air above. There were 3 cultivators riddled with wounds, and they were attacking Great General Shihua at the center. Marshal Shihua's golden robe had already become tattered, and it was no different from a beggar's robe. Her fair and tender skin would appear and disappear under the rags from time to time, giving her a seductive beauty that was in dire straits. If it weren't for the fact that she had been driven to the brink of insanity during the battle, which ruined her overall beauty, she really would have been quite a pitiful sight. Frosty Moon, Myriad Flower Wheel. Su Qianyun tapped her foot lightly into the air, and she evaded Great General Shihua's golden rock attacks with extreme agility. She then pressed a hand down toward Shihua, who was over a kilometer away. In the sky above, there were 3,000 moonlight disks, and their bright blue light eclipsed the crimson color of the sky. They covered the entire sky, and they rotated at high speed, slicing through the air before crashing down with extremely sharp killing intent that almost froze the surrounding space. Frosty Moon, 100-flower slaughter. This power is even more powerful than before? Great General Shihua looked up into the sky with astonishment on her face. Was she concealing her power? No. Great General Shihua shook her head. In the previous battle, there was no room for concealment. The slightest misstep would have resulted in death, and no one would be stupid enough to conceal their power. So, did that woman in the blue palatial dress receive a massive boost in power during the battle? Shihua was in disbelief. Who were these people? She immediately flew through the air on the countless golden rocks around her, hurtling toward the 3,000 moonlight disks in the sky like a streak of golden light. The 2 attacks clashed and exploded incessantly, creating a dazzling spectacle. The continuous output of power made Shihua quite exhausted, but she couldn't let her guard down. Boom! The air around Shihua suddenly became very active, and all of its power was released. That tall and arrogant figure was once again engulfed by the sudden explosion. Damn it! I'm going to kill you! A disheveled figure rushed out from the explosion before rushing toward the handsome man in the distance in a frenzy. When she said that they couldn't let down their guard, She was referring to the terrifying explosions that Xian Yuanqing would launch from time to time. Her clothes were torn because of Xian Yuanqing, her face turned black because of Xian Yuanqing, and she was injured because of Xian Yuanqing. This was a deep-seated hatred that could never be resolved. The extremely beautiful woman in the blue palace dress was clearly an assassin, but in Marshal Shihua's eyes, the handsome man in the white dress was more likely to be an assassin. All of a sudden, the air around her exploded, catching her off guard. If this wasn't an assassination, then what was? Marshal Shihua charged towards Xian Yuanqing. However, Xian Yuanqing's expression didn't change in the slightest. Instead, he became even more calm and collected. He wielded an ancient yellow sword in his hand, and the projection of a yin and yang fish appeared beneath his feet. Countless streams of white wind revolved around his body like clouds and mist, allowing him to predict the enemy's movements and also slow down the enemy's attacks. He wasn't flustered in the slightest. The myriad spirit Tai Chi Dao was the Dao that he was most proficient in. Explosions and whatnot were just side effects. After cultivating the myriad spirit Tai Chi Dao, he would be able to block and nullify all of his enemies' attacks. Shihua appeared before him in the blink of an eye, and her pink and white petals tore through the white mist and streams of wind like blades. Xian Yuanqing's expression remained unchanged as he charged forward with his sword in hand. 3 seconds later, Pua! Xian Yuanqing threw up a mouthful of blood, and his white robes were stained red as he retreated toward the rear with wounds riddled all over his body. At the same time, he continued to use explosions to slow down Shihua. "Don't run!" Marshal Shihua chased after him with killing intent surging from her body. Xian Yuanqing had wanted to use his myriad spirit Tai Chi Dao to slow down his enemy, but he was instantly defeated. He had no choice but to continue to use explosions to slow down Marshal Shihua as expected. Explosions were the most practical skills to use. Xian Yuanqing admitted this with a heavy heart as he fled for his life. Seeing that Shihua had turned her attention to Xian Yuanqing, Su Qianyun decided to launch another sneak attack. Her moonlight disk appeared and disappeared unpredictably, and she tried to assassinate Shihua over and over again, annoying her to no end. A blue moonlight disk slashed toward Shihua from behind. Shihua didn't even turn her head as she hurled a golden rock toward the moonlight disk behind her. Bam! The moonlight disk was knocked flying again. No matter what kind of attack it was unable to escape from Shihua's powerful senses. However, a slender and lithe figure suddenly rushed out from under the shadow of the moonlight disk. The silver light transformed into a streak of light that pierced towards Shihua with boundless killing intent. "You've finally made your move." Shihua was elated as opposed to being alarmed. All of the golden rocks flying around her, as well as the countless sharp killing flowers flying in the air, all of them aimed toward her. Yi Ling had to face almost all of Great General Shihua's attacks as soon as she appeared. However, to Shihua's surprise, there was no hint of panic on Yi Ling's face. There was only one expression on her face, and that was that she was going to die. Shihua was quite perplexed. There was no way that Yi Ling could kill her in her current state. If she were to continue onward, Yi Ling would most likely be insta-killed. But why was this woman still charging forward? Was she not afraid of death? At this moment, Shihua suddenly noticed that the projection of a black and white yin-yang formation had appeared on the ground beneath her feet, and at the center of it was none other than the place where she was standing. When was this set up? Could it be during the explosion? Shihua's expression shifted drastically as a realization suddenly occurred to her. Yi Ling closed in on the yin-yang symbol, and her eyes, which were as black as gemstones, shone with an enchanting light. Her lips curled up slightly, and the divine weapon in her hand, the sword to send you safely on your way, gave off boundless silver light. Everything happened almost in the blink of an eye. Yi Ling's body disappeared, and all of Shihua's attacks missed. At the same time, Yi Ling's figure appeared above the yin-yang formation, and both of them flew toward Shihua at the same speed. The sword fell. A sword projection froze the entire sky. Shihua didn't even have a chance to unleash another attack before a terrifying tearing sensation erupted from her neck. Heaven and earth flipped over in her eyes as her head spun. She knew that Yi Ling was proficient in shadow movement techniques, but never would she have thought that Xianyuanqing would leave behind a yin-yang formation after an explosion, thereby creating the ideal space for Yi Ling to use her shadow movement technique. Marshal Shihua hadn't expected this kind of tacit understanding and creative teamwork. In the end, she still lost to a few return-to-void stage mighty figures. Great General Shihua heaved a forlorn sigh in her heart as she slowly closed her eyes. Yi Ling panted heavily, but there was a hint of elation on her face. Her face, which had become deathly pale from overexertion, was now flushed with a hint of color, creating quite an enchanting sight to behold. "Master! I did it!" She gripped the silver dagger in her hand tightly as she turned toward the battlefield in the distance with a smile on her face, as if to say that she was no longer the disciple who would only be a burden to her master. She could also fight alongside her master and destroy powerful enemies on the battlefield. Chapter 1551. This was Yi Ling's unique emotion. Her master held a very important position in her heart. Being able to defeat a powerful enemy and prove to her master that she was useful was a greater sense of accomplishment than beating a powerful enemy herself. Yi Ling, Xianyuanqing, and Su Qianyun had just defeated a Heaven Pioneer stage great general, and their energy was completely depleted, but they still looked around to see if any of their comrades needed help. The most powerful returned to Void stage mighty figure under Nuwa's command. The Fist Sage wore a white cape and yellow tracksuit, and his red fists were imbued with earth-shattering power. "Ha!" He roared and threw a punch at Marshal Mia in front of him. As the fist fell, the fist force compressed the void to the extreme, flattening and compressing the void to the extreme. It even bloomed with extremely dazzling white light, as if the void had exploded and triggered a chain of energy release. Mia harumphed lightly before also launching a fist. An earth-shattering collision ensued, and an earth-shattering boom erupted as the earth within a radius of over 50 kilometers was pulverized. The Fist Sage was knocked back for several kilometers, and he threw up a mouthful of blood, but his battle intent was still surging as an expression of admiration appeared on his face. "You were able to take a serious punch from me. You're truly well-deserving of being a Heaven Enlightenment Realm powerhouse, to have the ability to be 50-50 with me." Miya's expression darkened upon hearing this. 50-50? Can you at least tell the two Blood Tribe mighty figures beside you to piss off when you say that? Cassidy's sword intent soared into the sky. A sinister ghostly aura revolved around Merlin's body, and a terrifying power erupted from his arms. That's right, the two Holy Blood cult fanatics had finally come to help the Fist Sage. The Fist Sage chortled with glee. "I wanted to have a fair battle with you, but they insisted on coming to help me, so I had no choice but to offend you." Miya's chest trembled with rage, but there was nothing she could do. At this moment, Cassidy, Merlin, and the Fist Sage joined forces to battle Miya again. Even a Heaven Pioneer stage great general would find it extremely difficult to face three mighty figures at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage at the same time. Very soon, Mia was besieged by the three of them, and she died from exhaustion and severe injuries. Great General Zhou Yi's situation was the best as he only had to face a Return to Void final stage mighty figure. His injuries were also the lightest out of all the marshals. Apart from a few deep wounds where the bones could be seen, there were only some superficial wounds. The only drawback was that he couldn't move. Because if he moved carelessly, the merciless light particles would cut through his skin. Zoe stood in the white square space with a look of despair on her face. She was locked in the same position by countless light particles. Her clothes were gone, and only a cloud of white mist covered her body. Streaks of blood appeared on his body, but they were shallow and did not harm his foundation. It was an injury left behind when he probed the light particle lines. If he was confident that he could live happily even if his body was sliced into tens of thousands of cubes, then he could indeed try to break into Bai Ling's white cube space. Is it not done yet? Zoe asked, feeling like crying. Bai Ling wore a pair of semi-transparent speckled glasses, and a divine Tao light erupted from her hand, enshrouding Zui Yi's blood bones, as well as all of the other parts of her body. A faint smile appeared on her face. Wait a while longer. Is it because of the environment? Your body's tissue activity is even more gentle than that of the heavenly human tried beings I've studied in the past. Your body is in a state of superquantum entanglement that is both dependent and free. Not bad. A satisfied smile appeared on Bai Ling's face. Cold sweat poured down Zoe's face. That's right, this heavenly human tribe great general had been reduced to Bai Ling's experimental subject. If it weren't for the fact that he still had absolute confidence in the two heavenly gods and was waiting for them to come and save him, he would most likely have already crashed into the particle formation and committed suicide. There was no way he would be willing to continue living like this. Bai Ling was most likely taking advantage of Zoe's psychological state to happily conduct experiments and collect materials. Experimenting on a living subject was undoubtedly better than experimenting on a dead subject, so she cherished this opportunity very much. Both of them had their own ideas, and they cooperated quite well throughout the entire process. Great General Zui Yi felt like he was in a pretty good situation. Aside from the fact that some parts of his body had been sliced off, he hadn't sustained any mental injuries. The brother who was dealing with the little red flower in the distance was in a much more pitiful state. In the end, he was gang-raped by over 100 muscular monks with benevolent smiles on their faces, creating an extremely gruesome and tragic scene. In any case, he had left an indelible impression on all of the great generals. In any case, they wouldn't be able to forget him even in death. 9 awe-inspiring, majestic heaven pioneer realm marshals. Now, only great General Zui Yi was still alive. Tina, Xiao Hong, and Xian Yuanqing didn't interfere at the sight of Bai Ling's final great general. Instead, they left him to Bai Ling. This was an act of absolute trust. There was no need for words. All of them turned their eyes toward the battlefield between Enlin and the Celestial Arch. This was a heavenly god-level battle, and even from afar, they were struck by a sense of horror. Every single attack was imbued with the power to annihilate heaven and earth, and if they were to get too close, they could be struck by the shockwaves or even perish. This is great. The Celestial Arch, Black Spirit Snake, and White Spirit Snake have dispelled the heavenly god's curse of karma, and that heavenly god is now on the back foot. He deserves this. Take advantage of his weakness to kill him. Haha, the male heavenly god has already awakened 8 divine halos, but why do I feel like heavenly goddess Lin Yu is more powerful than him even though she's awakened 7 divine halos? Perhaps they're using different methods of using their divine halos. Heavenly goddess Lin Yu is like a lunatic. At this moment, most of the spectators had turned toward Enlin with concern in their eyes. Enlin and the Phoenix had joined forces to battle heavenly goddess Lin Yu, and he was now on the back foot. Even though he had unleashed his heavenly wind power, he was only barely able to keep himself alive. He was in a perilous situation the entire time, and he didn't even have a chance to retaliate. Enlin was in a very panicked state, but he was determined to wear heavenly goddess Lin Yu down. Heavenly goddess Lin Yu seemed to have figured out Enlin's plan, and a smile of rage appeared on her face. You want to fight a battle of attrition? What makes you think you have the power to hold me off? She launched another vicious punch toward Enlin as she spoke. Enlin looked at the ball of wind around his body, upon which the power of his fist was beginning to wane, and his body was forced into retreat by a burst of power. Rumble, a massive trench was instantly gouged into his back by Lin Yu's fist. Lin Yu's attack had missed for the 100th time. Any human being would become extremely irritable after missing their attack so many times in a row. This was especially true for Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu, who had a bad temper to begin with. "You force me to do this." Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's expression gradually darkened as she stared at Lin, and a red divine halo began to appear over her heart. Chapter 1552. Lin's expression shifted again upon seeing Lin Yu unleash her 8th divine halo. Heavenly God Jordan's divine halo was most likely of the same type as Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's divine halo. Heavenly God Jordan's 8th divine halo had created such a massive commotion, so Lin was naturally aware of it. The 8th divine halo was a cursed divine halo of karma. The power imbued within this divine halo was far too peculiar and mysterious. Even the celestial Dharch had been struck by it, so Lin was not confident that he could withstand it. The evil-slaying sword flew out from Lin's back almost without any hesitation, and he gathered the power of the heavenly wind god into his sword before slashing it down. This was an absolute attack that could slice through all things in this world, the heavenly blade. The sword fell, and a thin white line sliced heaven and earth in half, imbued with absolute slicing power. Even though the power of the heavenly wind god would be severely restricted by the will of the heavenly Tao on the Tai Chu continent, it was still a peerless power in this world. No matter how it was restricted, it was still the overlord of all wind powers. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu sensed danger, and the blue defensive divine halo around her waist instantly materialized a shield in front of her. The heavenly blade struck the shield, upon which an extremely dazzling light erupted, as if two completely different powers of the heavenly gods were battling one another. Lin knew that the power unleashed by Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu through her divine halo couldn't be considered as the power of the heavenly gods. It could only be considered as a pseudo-heavenly god at most. Even though pseudo-heavenly gods weren't that pure, they were still imbued with the paramount will of the heavens, so they were still able to keep the power of the true heavenly gods at bay. The shield quickly cracked like glass. The power of the heavenly blade was also gradually weakening. Lin Yu chortled with glee as the shield was about to crumble, and she stomped her foot into the air, upon which a golden shield, a white shield, a purple shield, if the quality wasn't enough, then quantity would make up for it. Lin's lips twitched upon seeing this. Lin Yu was clearly letting herself loose by unleashing the power of her divine halo with no regard for its properties. It was actually very difficult to battle a lunatic like her. Perhaps she would become enraged and try to take you down with her. With this in mind, he couldn't help but think back to the heavenly time god's self-detonation. This experience had left a huge shadow in Lin's heart. The heavenly time god was a lunatic, and Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was also a lunatic. Holy **T. Why did he keep encountering these lunatics? After destroying Lin Yu's 3 shields, Skyblade's power dissipated into thin air. Lin took a deep breath before swinging his sword toward Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu again. Another heavenly blade flew through the air at an incredible speed, and the evil-slaying sword struck Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's shield just as it was about to fall. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu had no choice but to unleash her barrier again. At the same time, a cold smile appeared on her face. "What? You're afraid that I'll use my curse of karma, so you're going to attack first? Do you want to continue this battle of attrition?" "That's a good idea." The shield in front of the white-haired woman suddenly started to change shape, forming multiple layers of protection around her body. Bang! She tore through the void and charged toward Lin. "But can you stop me?" Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu pushed the heavenly blade toward Lin in an extremely frenzied and fearless manner. Along the way, she extended a snowy white finger and gently pierced through the protective barrier before tapping on the blade of wind, as if she was trying to forcibly establish a connection through her enemy's spell technique, just like Heavenly God Jordan had done. However, even though her finger was about to break, she was still unable to establish a connection. Lin didn't even know what to say upon seeing this. Heavenly God Jordan was only able to establish a connection with the Celestial Dharch, as the Celestial Dharch seal was a spell technique created by the Celestial Dharch himself. However, Unlin had stolen his heavenly wind power, which was a spell technique created by the heavenly wind god, so it was completely different. Even if he were to establish a curse of karma, the target of the curse would most likely be the heavenly wind god, heavenly goddess Lin. You had also realized this, and she pounced toward Unlin without any hesitation. The red divine halo on her chest imbued her fist as she launched an attack toward Unlin. If she couldn't establish a connection through spell techniques, then she would establish a connection through physical contact. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's fist crashed into Unlin's windshield, and its speed began to slow down. However, Lin Yu's speed and power were both significantly higher after activating her 8 divine halos, and Unlin's instincts told him that there was no way to evade this attack. If things continued like this, he was definitely going to be struck. Unlin's heart jolted with shock, and he instinctively pulled out his mirror from his storage ring. He couldn't face Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu head-on at a time like this, so he would have to let the vermilion bird mirror do the job. At this moment, Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's fist had already fallen. Boom! An extremely terrifying power swept forth, and the power of the karma curse also erupted forth. A dazzling light erupted from the vermilion bird mirror, as if it was trying to repel the paramount will imbued within Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's fist. Ah! A crisp, tender, yet extremely enraged scream erupted. Idiot N, what the hell are you doing? It hurts, ah! Crack! The sound of something shattering abruptly erupted. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was blasted flying for over 10 kilometers by an unparalleled force, and she felt as if her arm were going to be completely crippled. PFFF. Blood trickled down from the corners of Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's lips. She hadn't held back in her attack against Unlin, so she had been struck by her most powerful attack when she was completely defenseless. Unlin had no time to be elated. Instead, he turned toward the vermilion bird mirror with a panicked expression. The smooth surface of the vermilion bird mirror was already riddled with cracks, and it was as if it had transformed from a young and flawless maiden into a frail old woman with wrinkles all over its face. Little sparrow, are you all right? Unlin was panicking. Never would he have thought that the vermilion bird mirror would crack open after taking a single attack from Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. The vermilion bird mirror had been with him for so many years and had saved him from many perilous situations, so they had a very good relationship. Even though they would often bicker or argue with one another, there was still a deep respect for one another. Now, the vermilion bird mirror had cracked open. It was as if Unlin's best friend had died, and he was on the verge of tears. Don't you know what's happening to me? My face has cracked open. What? Unlin, you stupid C*NT. You B** starred. You F** king idiot. I'm not done with you, wah. The vermilion bird mirror let loose a torrent of abuse as it sobbed. Unlin heaved a long sigh of relief. Thank goodness you can still speak. You're not dead yet. Thank goodness? F***CKU. You can't see me. The vermilion bird mirror suddenly felt a warm sensation on its surface. It was at a complete loss for words, and an expression of astonishment appeared on its face. Unlin picked up the vermilion bird mirror with excitement and planted a kiss on its cracked surface. Chapter 1553. Unlin didn't actually think too much about it. The vermilion bird mirror had saved him on many occasions, and he was extremely grateful to see that the vermilion bird mirror was still alive, so he gave it a kiss. It was just a kiss from a mirror. This was like a jade pendant that fell to the ground and didn't shatter, only for someone to pick it up, kiss it, and then thank the heavens and earth. And then, the vermilion bird mirror exploded. The entire mirror tremored violently. Holy F***CK. Idiot N. Have you gone insane? You my first kiss. Wah. The vermilion bird mirror cried for a while before falling completely silent, as if it had died. Unlin, did it become autistic after being kissed by me? You King mirror had your first kiss? No, that wasn't the point. The point wasn't it just kissing a mirror? How was he supposed to know that the surface of the mirror was her mouth? This didn't make any sense. And Lin's expression was one of complete disbelief. A sense of rage welled up in Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's heart after being ignored. Her opponent didn't care about her at all. Instead, he was asking about her well-being and even shoving dog food into her mouth. How did it feel to be shoved dog food into her mouth by a mirror? Die. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu let loose an enraged roar as a golden divine light enveloped her hand before stabbing it toward Lin's heart with a sinister smile on her face. Ha ha. Keep dodging. So what if you can use your heavenly wind power to evade my attack? After establishing a karmic connection, killing myself is the same as killing you. How are you going to evade? Splat. Pure white blood splattered through the air. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu let loose a wail of agony as her hand pierced through her body, upon which blood flowed like milk onto her snowy white hand blade. This was the feeling of her heart being torn apart. She was in a lot of pain, but her expression was one of extreme fanaticism as she stared at Lin with anticipation, hoping to see him wail in agony. Lin was also very nervous, and he swallowed a regenerative immortal pill in advance. Master! Yi Ling clenched her fists tightly as she spectated from afar with a concerned expression. Master! Big brother and classmate Lin! Venerated forefather! Everyone outside the arena was shocked when they saw this. They knew that with the destruction of the vermilion bird mirror, Lin could very well follow in the footsteps of the celestial Dharch. Everyone's hearts were in their throat. Bang! There was an explosion. Blood splattered. Screams rang out again. Lin, the Phoenix, and Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu were all astonished. All of them were staring at Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's heart, where blood had once again blossomed, staining her golden robe white in an extremely poignant manner. That blood-curdling cry had come from none other than Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. Ing. What's going on? Lin's eyes widened as he stared at Lin Yu's heart, which had exploded twice in a row. It looked like her heart was really beyond saving. Could it be? Lin thought back to the vermilion bird mirror and the reflection spell technique. Although the sparrow is broken, the spell reflection effect is still there. The sparrow has reflected Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's curse of karma back to her, thereby allowing her to establish a connection with herself. After that, if Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu were to injure herself, she would be able to use the power of karma to reflect upon herself, thereby creating a double whammy. Lin spoke with an excited expression. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's blood flow was disrupted upon hearing this, and she threw up another large mouthful of blood. There was only one thought flashing through her mind. What the F***ck did I just do? I killed myself twice? Buy one get one free? Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu felt as if 10,000 mythological beasts were stampeding over her heart. After figuring out what had happened in an extremely short period of time, the green divine halo behind her began to unleash its regenerative power in a frenzy in an attempt to recover from the injury to her heart. Lin was not going to let her have her way upon seeing this. Eat this, heavenly blade. Lin immediately unleashed his heavenly wind power and slashed toward Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu had no choice but to unleash a portion of her power to defend herself against Lin's attack. The Phoenix was also a ruthless person who wanted to take her life when she saw that she was sick. She immediately let out a loud cry and spat out the Nirvana heaven-splitting flame, burning the heavens and swallowing the earth. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu originally had a huge advantage, but she was now at a disadvantage, and she could only defend herself against the torrential attacks of the two mighty figures. And all of this was due to her mistake in unleashing her curse of karma. Xianyuan Qing, Cassidy, and the others were all ecstatic, but they also couldn't help but grumble. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu and Heavenly God Jordan had been as ferocious as dogs back when they had their 7 divine halos, but after activating their 8th divine halo and unleashing their curse of karma, the tables were instantly turned. Heavenly Gods Lin Yu and Jordan were being bashed like dogs, as expected of a curse of karma. However, it wasn't cursing their enemies, but themselves. One of them had almost destroyed her body and soul, while the other had punctured her heart twice in a row. If this wasn't a curse, then what was? It was all thanks to the assistance of the eighth divine halo and the idiotic tactics of the two heavenly gods that Unlin and the celestial Dharch were finally able to see the light of victory. The attacks were still relentlessly raging. Heavenly God Jordan's body and consciousness had both been severely wounded, and he could only squeeze more and more power into himself to recover from his injuries while defending himself against the combined attacks of the celestial Dharch, Black Spirit Snake, and White Spirit Snake. As a result, the feeble heavenly god Jordan was unable to keep up with the relentless barrage of attacks, and his injuries continued to worsen. He could only unleash more power to recover from his injuries, but he was unable to keep up with the attacks, thereby creating a vicious cycle. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu wasn't much better off. Unlin was clearly on the brink of death, but he still forced himself to unleash 5 heavenly blades in a row, as if he were trying to exhaust her to death. However, it had to be said that it was very effective. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu didn't even have time to unleash multiple shields, and the residual power of the heavenly blades pierced through her body, inflicting 2 extremely severe wounds on her body. The 2 heavenly gods were clearly in a very dire situation, and it was only a matter of time before they were defeated. Unless they could become even more powerful and obtain the power of new divine halos, there was no way they could turn the tables. So were these heavenly gods going to obtain new divine halos? All of the spectators, as well as Unlin, the celestial Dharch, and the others, had the same question in their hearts. This question was like a massive mountain weighing down on everyone's hearts. No one knew how many divine halos a divine heaven stage heavenly human could activate. As such, no one dared to say that they were going to win this battle for sure. Boom! A golden pillar of light fell from the sky and blasted heavenly goddess Lin Yu to the ground. The phoenix spread its wings and looked down upon the heavenly gods with a haughty expression. Heavenly goddess Lin Yu was like a goddess who had fallen to the mortal world. Her entire body was riddled with wounds and charred black wounds, and she appeared to be in an extremely sorry state. The rot on her wrist had already spread to her entire arm. No one noticed that her pupils had gradually turned from pure golden to inky black. Chapter 1554. Heavenly God Jordan couldn't help but yell upon seeing Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's condition. Lin Yu, calm down. Don't use it no matter what. The extremely disheveled Lin Yu slowly stood up from the ground. Her long, snowy white hair draped over her shoulders, and her inky black eyes were imbued with a peculiar suction force, as if they were going to engulf everything. The blood-red sky shone its light on the devastated land, fusing with the dark gray soil. It was as if the earth was seeping with blood, and there was a tragic silence in the desolation. She raised her head and looked into the blood-colored and despairing heavens. The corners of her lips twitched, as if she wanted to laugh. With a bit of distress, she said, "I'm sorry, I really can't calm down. It really is too infuriating. How can the celestial clan's dignity be beaten into the ground like this? What else can I do? I can only kill all of them." Heavenly God Jordan still wanted to say something. Boom! An inky black divine halo appeared above Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's head. This was the first time a divine halo had appeared above a heavenly goddess's head. The dark divine light seemed to be trying to suck in all things between heaven and earth. Unlin had never seen such pure darkness before. It was as if there was no light or anything around the divine halo, and darkness was eternal. Lin Yu's pristine, flawless skin and snowy white dress created a stark contrast with the black halo above her head. If it weren't for her divine halo, Unlin would have been instantly plunged into darkness. Almost everyone was given a fright upon seeing this. Everyone could sense the purest power emanating from the divine halo. This was darkness and terror that none of the previous divine halos could compare to. Unlin's expression became extremely grave, and he immediately unleashed another heavenly blade toward heavenly goddess Lin Yu. The blade materialized from the wind, sliced through all things before crashing down upon the woman on the ground with boundless sharpness. The woman stood on the spot and raised her head. Her inky black eyes contracted slightly, and she seemed to be glaring at the heavenly blade as a black ripple surged through the air toward the heavenly blade. Bam! The heavenly blade began to distort. The pure white blade radiance seemed to have fallen into an endless abyss and was devoured by the darkness. Its might became weaker and weaker, dimmer and dimmer. When it reached heavenly goddess Lin Yu raised her fair, jade-like hand and gave the heavenly blade a nonchalant slap, upon which it shattered and disappeared into nothingness. And Lin's eyes widened, and he couldn't help but take a deep breath. Heavenly goddess Lin Yu had to conjure up at least 3 to 4 divine halos to defend herself against this attack. Now, he was able to block the heavenly blade with just a black divine ring? Sigh. Why did you have to go so far? Heavenly God Jordan heaved a forlorn sigh as he looked at Lin Yu with furrowed brows. Heavenly goddess Lin Yu stood on the ground, and the complex expression on her face had completely disappeared. Instead, she appeared extremely cold and tranquil as she looked up at Lin. In that instant, Lin's entire body was struck by an extremely powerful sense of peril. This was a feeling that he had never experienced before. It was as if there was an extremely terrifying chaotic beast in the boundless darkness that was trying to drag him into the boundless darkness with its sharp claws. Whoosh! Another burst of tremors erupted. All of heavenly goddess Lin Yu's other 8 divine halos suddenly detached themselves from her hands, feet, waist, back, neck, and heart before fusing into the black divine halo above her head. No, rather than fusing into the divine halo, it was more accurate to say that they were being engulfed by the black divine halo. The rotten parts on heavenly goddess Lin Yu's arms also quickly contracted before disappearing. Her temperament became even more refined. Looking at her flawless arms that were as white as jade, a faint smile of satisfaction appeared on her face. This was the first time Lin had seen heavenly goddess Lin Yu display any emotions in her current state. It had to be said that her love for beauty could break through some kind of barrier. Soon, her cold and indifferent gaze converged on Lin's body again. I'm going to show you the true power of a divine heaven stage cultivator with all 9 divine halos open. Lin Yu's voice was very pleasant to the ears, but it sounded like the whisper of a demon, sending chills running down one's spine. And Lin felt like he was done for. He knew that his opponent was most likely the most powerful opponent he had ever faced. His nerves tensed up, and he activated his heavenly wind power to its very maximal extent. Heavenly goddess Lin Yu stepped forward, and spatial ripples surged through the air. In the next instant, she had already appeared behind Lin. So fast. Lin was already struggling to keep up with Lin Yu's 8 divine halos. Now that she had activated all 9 of her divine halos, Lin Yu's speed had increased explosively once again. Even if Lin were to unleash his senses to the fullest extent, he would still be unable to keep up with her. All of the hairs on Lin's body stood on end, and he immediately turned around. Wind of absolute power. A barrier of wind instantly materialized, keeping all powers at bay. Heavenly goddess Lin Yu unleashed a simple punch toward Lin. Her delicate fist was enshrouded in a dark divine light, and it was like a bolt of white lightning flashing through the boundless darkness before striking the indestructible barrier of wind. 2 bursts of power imbued with the power of absolute laws clashed at this moment. Lin could sense a boundless amount of energy hurtling toward him. There was no end to this boundless energy, and there was not even the slightest hint of hope. There was only absolute darkness and nothingness. This was a power of darkness that he had never encountered before, and it could engulf him at any moment. Lin knew that if it weren't for the protection of his heavenly wind power, he would have been obliterated by that punch a long time ago. He was just about to take advantage of the wind of absolute power to defend himself against Lin Yu's fist before unleashing an evasive movement technique. However, Lin Yu's fist pierced through the wind of absolute power and was hurtling toward his lower abdomen. Even with the wind of absolute power as an impediment, the fist was still far too fast. Lin twisted his waist, and the fist brushed past his waist, upon which a dark divine light instantly engulfed the flesh on the side of his waist into nothingness. Bam! The fist was imbued with immense power, and it knocked Lin flying along with it. The sound of internal organs and bones being crushed rang out. Lin flew through the air like a cannonball before crashing into the ground, causing the earth to quake violently. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu descended from the sky, and her flawless features and perfect figure made her appear as if she were a celestial maiden descending upon the mortal world. However, the black divine halo above her head, the crimson sky behind her, and the emotionless expression on her face made her appear as if she were a demon descending upon this world. These two dispositions were contradictory yet harmonious at the same time. Lin lay on the ground and looked on as Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu descended, as if she were a death god who was harvesting his life. Right at this moment, the phoenix hurtled through the air for over 50 kilometers, and a sea of flames erupted behind it, incinerating space itself as it crashed toward Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu like the sun. F***ck off. Lin Yu unleashed a palm strike. The phoenix, which was like a falling sun, was actually slapped away by her like a rubber ball. Lin Yu continued to pounce toward Lin with ferocious killing intent. Lin, what kind of vendetta was this? Couldn't she deal with little Huang first? Chapter 1555. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's speed, power, and reaction speed were all extremely difficult to deal with. Lin had already fallen into a dire situation. He wasn't even confident that he could withstand Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's next attack. If he really couldn't, then he was really going to be screwed. He couldn't defend, so he had to attack. However, even Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was not afraid of the heavenly blade materialized by Lin's heavenly wind power, so what else could pose a threat to her? He couldn't fight her head-on. It was best to launch a surprise attack. Not only did it have to be powerful, but it had to be a power that could ignore distance and distance. A power that was fast and vicious. Got it. Lin swung his evil-slaying sword in the blink of an eye. Vanquish the heavens and slay all evil, annihilation. An invisible power pierced through space and struck Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's chest in a peculiar pattern. Lin had no time to react. He could only see a woman hurtling toward him, and he didn't even have time to aim before unleashing a powerful attack upon her chest. Bam! Pure white liquid splattered all over his face, and a peculiar fragrance wafted through the air. This was a very unique scent of blood. Lin was just about to unleash a fist upon Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu, but a massive hole had already appeared in her chest, as if it had been annihilated by a paramount power. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu stared blankly at Lin with a dumbstruck expression. Lin's heart also jolted with shock. He didn't think that little Xie would be able to destroy Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu even after she had activated her 9th divine halo. He immediately squeezed out more power from his body in an attempt to unleash another annihilation technique. This was not enough to kill Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu recovered in an extremely short time, and her reaction speed was also extremely fast as she instantly disappeared from Lin's field of vision. Lin's nerves were extremely tense, and he unleashed his divine sense over 50 kilometers while unleashing his divine inspection technique to stare intently at the space up ahead in an attempt to keep up with his opponent. However, his opponent was simply too fast, and her body transformed into a series of afterimages that were impossible to track. The evil-slaying sword had to lock onto its target before unleashing its annihilation technique in order to inflict damage. Now that Lin couldn't even aim at Lin Yu, how could he hit her? If he randomly used skills and relied on luck, wasting his energy for nothing, It would be suicide in a battle of this level. Lin looked at the dazzling movement technique, his body a little sluggish. In my eyes, you're as slow as a snail. You can't even see what I'm doing, let alone keep up with me. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's voice sounded. Because of the rapid change of location, her voice seemed to come from all directions. And Lin chuckled. Don't underestimate snails. They can also become Tao integration stage mythological beasts. In an instant, Lin Yu appeared in front of Lin in a flash. Her pitch-black eyes stared at him coldly, as if she wanted to pull him into an endless darkness. Unfortunately, you're not a snail. And Lin could see that the gaping hole in her chest had already been completely healed as she flashed through the air. Her snow-white skin was exposed, and there were no flaws at all. So white, so big. Pooh! No, what astonishing regenerative abilities! And Lin was just about to unleash his vanquish the heavens and slay all evil annihilation technique again when Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu disappeared again. In the next instant, Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu had already appeared on Lin's left, and she turned like a butterfly before lashing out with a ferocious kick. Both the timing and the distance were perfect, and Lin could only see the white crystal shoe, which was enshrouded in the paramount intent of the divine halo of darkness, transform into a mixture of black and white before crashing into the wind of absolute power. The wind of absolute power had the effect of buffering and even isolating all power. Even if it couldn't block the wind of absolute power, Lin could still use the gentle power of the wind to propel himself forward at high speed. However, Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's side kick was as explosive as fire, and even the gentle and supple wind was transformed into a violent storm with absolute power. The power contained in the wind instantly bent his waist, breaking his tendons and bones, and even his spine was bent. Bam! An earth-shattering boom erupted. And Lin was knocked flying by the wind before tumbling to the ground, and the coffin behind him also crashed to the ground. Immediately afterward, he threw up another mouthful of blood. It could be said that this was the first time he had been wounded by his heavenly wind power. Why was Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's divine halo even more powerful than his heavenly wind power? This didn't make any sense. How about it? Lin Yu made her way toward Lin in a graceful manner. Do you understand the disparity between us now? She extended a hand, and a black longsword appeared in her hand. The pure black color of the sword struck one with a sense of horror. In that instant, the sky and clouds were completely obscured, and only the darkness remained in her hand. And Lin gripped his evil-slaying sword tightly as he crawled up from the ground. At this moment, Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu had already appeared before him with a cold and emotionless expression in her eyes. It's over. And Lin struggled to resist, only to discover that his energy had already been completely depleted. His body was extremely exhausted from using the power of the heavenly handle and all types of high-rank spell technique. After being squeezed for so long, his body was like a desert, and there was not a single drop of water that could be extracted from it. Was this really the end? And Lin's body trembled slightly, and he gripped his evil-slaying sword tightly before turning to swing it. Even if his speed, power, and techniques were all inferior to Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's, he was going to die fighting. Boom! Something suddenly exploded behind him. And Lin let loose a wail of anguish, and he almost fell to the ground again. A red shadow crashed toward Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. This was the lid of the immortal Tool Blood Soul Jade coffin. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was not alarmed by this sudden turn of events. She harumphed coldly before slashing her black longsword through the air, upon which the immortal tool coffin lid was sliced in half. The coffin lid fell to the ground. A woman in a jade dress appeared behind Lin. Her eyes were pure golden, and her holy flame wings spread open like feathers. Transparent golden dragon scales appeared all over her body, and her aura soared explosively. She had unleashed her Vermilion Bird True Dragon and Vermilion Bird Mystic techniques again. And Lin stared at the woman who had suddenly appeared with astonishment on his face, as if she were the only figure in this world. The battle had been too intense, and he had forgotten that he was carrying the coffin and Su Xiaolan on his back. Su Xiaolan's sudden appearance was like a beam of light that pierced through the darkness that enshrouded his heart. "Didn't you say you wanted to see the heaven-crushing techniques I've mastered?" Her voice was as pleasant and melodious as an oriole's. She took a glance at Enlin, and a faint blush appeared on her face, perhaps due to the fact that her holy flame wings were too hot. Lin Yu was not going to wait for Su Xiaolan and Enlin to exchange pleasantries, and she immediately charged over. She was going to kill them all at once, so they should be a family. Su Xiaolan's fingers formed a strange seal that resembled both a dragon and a phoenix. Heaven-crushing technique, love trumps the heavens. Su Xiaolan roared with shame etched on her face. Enlin. Chapter 1556. Love trumps the heavens? This was clearly an intense battle, but Enlin couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood upon hearing this. What kind of magical name was this? And it wasn't just him. Even the caster himself had a look of shame on his face. Couldn't Su Xiaolan just change her name? Enlin was grumbling internally, but he also felt an indescribable sense of warmth. It was just like when your wife suddenly did something silly for you. You would complain about it, but the corners of your mouth would also involuntarily curl up. You couldn't help but smile, feeling warm and happy. Soon, Enlin realized just how appropriate the name Xiaolan had come up with was. Tears suddenly flowed from Su Xiaolan's eyes as she made a few hand seals. Wah! Enlin, you're so pitiful, Enlin. What was going on? Why was she suddenly acting? Could it be that this was an act? But don't worry, I won't let you die. I won't let you leave me again. Su Xiaolan's eyes became more and more determined. This was an emotion that would never be erased no matter how much time passed. Golden light burst forth from her hands as she made a hand seal. It was as dazzling and eye-catching as the rising sun. Not only was the golden light imbued with the most powerful emotions, but it was also imbued with an extremely powerful heaven-crushing intent, as if love could conquer everything. It formed a stark contrast with Lin Yu's power of darkness. One side was filled with limitless possibilities, while the other side was filled with boundless despair and darkness. Su Xiaolan's voice was gentle but firm. Even if the sky falls, even if you fall and can't fight anymore, I will stand in front of you and be your pillar of support. Gale force winds swept through the air. Su Xiaolan stood in front of Enlin, and her hair danced in the wind as boundless golden light reflected in her eyes. So what if it's the heavens? My feelings for you can't be stopped by the heavenly Tao. If the heavens want to deal with us, then we'll destroy the heavens together. I'd rather die than retreat. Su Xiaolan let loose a clear cry, and an extremely powerful diamond-shaped golden light suddenly shot forth from her hand seal. It was divine to the extreme, rich to the extreme, as if it was born from primal chaos, unique and unmatched. When heaven and earth are born, it will always exist. When heaven and earth are destroyed, it will still exist. Once it appears, it will shock heaven and earth. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's expression shifted drastically, and she instinctively sensed danger. She immediately raised her black longsword and slashed it toward the oncoming golden light. Rumble! Heaven and earth were instantly filled with two colors. The eternal darkness and the golden light that was filled with boundless emotions fought against each other. The void cracked for hundreds of miles. The collision of destructive energy made the world seem like it was the end of the world. The celestial Dharch, white spirit snake, black spirit snake, and heavenly god Jordan were all knocked flying by this power, and they stared at the scenes unfolding before their eyes in astonishment. What's the situation? Su Xiaolan is able to cast such a terrifying spell? This is the power of heaven crushing. It also possesses the power of an essence holy beast. Who would have thought that the combination of an essence holy beast and a heaven-crushing technique would be able to unleash such a terrifying attack? The celestial Dharch and the spirit snake sisters were both surprised and elated to see this. Yiling was also cheering loudly for her mistress. Heavenly God Jordan wore an expression of incredulity. When Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu unleashed her ninth divine halo, he had thought that everyone's chances of survival had been reduced to zero. However, who would have thought that such a freakishly powerful female cultivator would emerge from her coffin? Within the boundless golden light, Lin looked at Su Xiaolan's back, and her jade barley ink garment danced in the wind, giving him an indescribable sense of security and warmth. He instantly understood everything. Emotion trumps the heavens was a heaven-crushing technique that was a combination of her essential bloodline and the truest emotions. Were emotions power? Just look at Cassidy and Merlin's battle against the ancient dragon empress. If fervor and unyieldingness could be used to nurture the heaven-crushing technique, then why couldn't the truest emotions be used as well? Su Xiaolan's emotions toward Lin had been nurtured through countless battles of life and death with him. The entire world had thought that Lin was going to die for sure, but he still persisted for over 100 years. Emotion trumps the heavens. No matter what happened, she was determined to fight by Lin's side. This was the conviction that even if the heavens wanted to kill Lin, she would still be able to raise her sword and fight. Protect, persevere, battle, conviction. All types of scorching and sincere emotions were fused into the spell technique to unleash an extremely dazzling light. Furthermore, the true intent of this spell technique would reach its pinnacle when Lin was on the brink of death and completely defenseless. Su Xiaolan hated herself for being so powerless when Lin was on the brink of death. The battle against the Dark Knight Monarch on Earth, the battle against Palace Leader Qing Li of the Holy Glacial Region, the battle against the Heavenly Wind God of the Celestial Court, the battle against the Heavenly Time God. These situations repeated themselves over and over again. She could only be a bystander. This sense of powerlessness, this strong desire to change, finally materialized into the most powerful emotional energy after coming into contact with the heaven-crushing technique's true intent. If this power were to be unleashed, even the heavens could be vanquished. This was love trumps the heavens. Even though this name was quite shameful, it was very practical and suited Su Xiaolan's feelings very well. On the battlefield, the power of Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's ninth divine halo was absolute darkness. When it clashed with the most dazzling emotions in this world, it was as if two extremes had collided, resulting in the most violent reaction. The shock waves of energy instantly annihilated everything around them. The two powers clashed in a frenzy, one imbued with the paramount will of the heavens, while the other imbued with an extremely powerful heaven-crushing intent. Su Xiaolan was situated at the center of the energy vortex and was struck by the most terrifying shockwave. Blood was already trickling down the corners of her lips, but she didn't take a single step back as she stood in front of Lin. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's body had already been forced back quite a bit by the golden energy. Even though they were still locked in a stalemate, an expression of astonishment had appeared on her face. How could this be? What kind of technique is this? I'm clearly on the back foot with my ninth divine halo. Just as Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was astonished, a series of black lines began to appear on her pristine, snowy skin. These black lines formed special veined patterns, as if some kind of energy were quickly circulating within them. Lin Yu let loose a wail of agony as her aura soared explosively. The black sword projection became more and more terrifying, and an aura that seemed to be able to extinguish all things erupted forth, instantly crushing the golden heaven-crushing light. Su Xiaolan gritted her teeth and held on with all her might. The powerful emotions in her heart were what kept her from collapsing. It was also at this moment that she suddenly felt a large hand encircling her slender waist. Su Xiaolan's heart jolted with shock. At this moment, a gentle voice sounded beside her ear. "Thank you for buying time for me, Xiaolan." Lin held Su Xiaolan with one arm while pointing at Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu with his other hand. "As your Tao partner, we should fight our enemies together." A blush appeared on Su Xiaolan's face again upon hearing this. Your technique is called Love Trumps the Heavens, so I'll call this Finger Love Crushes the Heavens. Chapter 1557. Su Xiaolan faltered slightly before murmuring to herself, Love trumps the heavens? Love trumps the heavens? If she were to recite these two sentences in tandem, she would feel a lot less embarrassed. Lin Yu became even more enraged at the sight of Su Xiaolan and Lin hugging each other, whispering sweet nothings, and flinging dog food at one another in the midst of battle. Her black longsword fell with reckless abandon. At this moment, an extremely dazzling golden light had already burst forth from Lin's fingertip. A peerless heaven-crushing intent erupted forth. This was the most essential spell technique of the heaven-crushing sect, the Finger of the Heavenly Tao. Only the heavenly disciples of the heaven-crushing sect had the right to master the Finger of the Heavenly Tao, and it could be said to be a paramount heaven-crushing technique. The entire sky was instantly torn in half by the power of the golden finger, and the clouds dissipated as an unstoppable golden energy tore through the air like a surging heavenly river, shattering the space around it. The wind and clouds were transformed by the power of the finger. Lin imitated Lin and imbued his own Finger of the Heavenly Tao with the power of emotion. This power was a powerful emotion that would kill anyone who dared to bully Xiaolan. An extremely powerful emotion fed into the spell technique, and the Finger of the Heavenly Tao was imbued with the power of emotion, thereby making it even more powerful. At this moment, Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's black longsword was already slowly tearing through Su Xiaolan's Love Trumps the Heavens, and it was about to strike the two of them at the same time. However, a dazzling golden light erupted from Lin's fingertip at this moment, and his fingertip struck Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's black longsword. A violent collision ensued. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was struck by an unstoppable power. It was boundless and extremely domineering, as if it could even crush the great Tao. The unstoppable sword strike was abruptly stopped in its tracks. How could this be? Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's eyes widened with incredulity. Wasn't Lin already on the brink of exhaustion? Why did he still have the energy to unleash such a terrifying spell technique? Furthermore, this spell technique was clearly an extremely advanced, heaven-crushing spell technique. The long sword, which was imbued with eternal darkness, was now riddled with cracks that were visible to the naked eye. It was as if a beam of golden light had pierced through the darkness and illuminated everything. What was even more infuriating was that Lin Yu could sense an extremely powerful sense of love from this power. F***CK. What the F***CK is this? Break. Lin Yu let loose a furious roar, and the divine ring above her head began to glow with dazzling divine light. The pitch-black veined patterns on her body also began to spread, as if they were going to engulf her. The black longsword was then shattered right before her eyes of disbelief. The Finger of the Heavenly Tao smashed through the black longsword and landed directly on Lin Yu's chest, creating yet another ghastly hole in her body. The golden light traversed the world, illuminating the earth and the sky in a golden radiance. Everywhere it passed, space was shattered into pieces for hundreds of kilometers, and it even left a bottomless trench in the ground. Lin Heave, Xiaolan Realm, Chu Ming Heaven, Air, Heaven, Trum, my saint, divine trumps, Lin, to say, Fong, an indescribable pain surged through Lin Yu's entire body. What was even more terrifying was that these two powers contained a strong sense of love. One was, even the heavens will destroy anyone who dares to bully Lin, and the other was, I will destroy anyone who dares to bully Xiaolan. Two incomparably intense feelings of love fused together, crazily attacking each other's divine soul, giving the most violent mental blow. Blood-curdling screams resounded throughout heaven and earth. Lin Yu was blasted several tens of thousands of meters away, and she rolled on the ground in a sorry state. The bloody hole in her chest was still flowing with pure white blood, and her body was motionless while her aura was completely concealed. It was unknown whether she was dead or alive. The world regained its tranquility. Everyone stared blankly at the scene in front of them. This was the first time that Xianyuan Qing, Su Qianyun, and his other companions had seen Enlin execute the finger of the heavenly Tao. They were so shocked that their mouths were agape as they stared blankly at the young man who had stretched out his finger. The special effects were gone, but the young man still looked very handsome when he stretched out his finger, and his image became taller. No, how could this be? A divine heaven stage mighty figure with 9 divine halos is invincible in this world. How could she have been defeated just like that? Impossible. Heavenly God Jordan shook his head relentlessly with an expression of disbelief on his face. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu with her 9 divine halos was indeed invincible in this world. She was even able to easily vanquish the power of the heavenly wind god. Even though the power of the heavenly gods was restricted by the heavenly Tao, Lin Yu's power had already been amply demonstrated. And Lin was completely convinced by the rumors that a divine heaven stage heavenly human tribe mighty figure possessed power that rivaled that of a god of creation. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu had been defeated by his heaven-crushing technique. Su Xiaolan's super-powerful heaven-crushing techniques and Enlin's heaven-crushing techniques were interlinked, and true love was invincible. In the end, Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu was still able to crush Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu had been fed 2 rounds of dog food, and she tumbled to the ground, and it was unknown whether she was dead or alive. However, what was certain was that she had been severely wounded both physically and mentally. This was perhaps the most pitiful character that Enlin had ever seen. How could she not be pitiful after being attacked by the power of love between him and Su Xiaolan? Su Xiaolan's buff mystic technique disappeared, and her body swayed slightly as she was about to collapse. Enlin immediately drew her into his arms before asking in a gentle voice, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Su Xiaolan shook her head with difficulty. Her features were deathly pale, but she forced a smile onto her face. "I've just overexerted myself, so I need to rest for a while." Enlin nodded in a gentle voice. "Don't worry, I'll protect you. Leave this place to me." Enlin's eyes suddenly rolled into his head as he spoke, and his entire body gave out as he tumbled to the ground with Su Xiaolan in tow. Thump! The two of them made intimate contact with the ground. Su Xiaolan. "Enlin, is this what you meant by leave it to you?" Su Xiaolan felt like her head was about to explode. She might have hit her head on the ground. Enlin was feeling very awkward. He was holding on to Su Xiaolan earlier, but when he fell to the ground, it was Su Xiaolan who was holding on to him instead. Furthermore, he was holding on to one of Su Xiaolan's arms. Enlin struggled to crawl up from the ground, only to find that his entire body was completely limp and powerless, and he grimaced in pain from the terrifying backlash he was feeling. Su Xiaolan hugged Enlin tightly upon seeing this before pulling out a regenerative immortal pill from her storage ring and feeding it to Enlin. "It's all right now, Enlin." Su Xiaolan held onto the man in her arms tightly and struggled to get up, only to find that she was unable to. The two of them lay motionless on the ground with awkward expressions on their faces. This was most likely the true portrayal of a couple in dire straits. Even though they had achieved victory, Enlin still didn't forget the fine tradition of finishing off an opponent. He raised his head and yelled with all the strength in his body, "Little Huang, finish them off!"